And we're good. All right, guys. I'm here today with Kay Zak. For those that don't know, I discovered Kay Zak through a Steve Shives live stream, which I bet you're all wondering why I was watching a Steve Shives live stream. Well, she's the reason, straight up. So say hello, Kay.
Hi.
Hello.
How is it, everybody?
Well, all the zero viewers that we got right now because
Oh,
it's
okay.
9:30 on a Sunday morning.
Uh-huh.
They'll watch later. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. So basically, I just wanted to bring Kay and just have a little chat and get to know her a little bit, and maybe get her channel some extra subs. Even though I've only got like maybe 100 more subs than you, so we're pretty close. But yeah, so we were just talking about feminism, third wave feminism, and the radical aspect of it, right? And one of the interesting things that actually for the Shive stream in particular was when you actually said, like, when he's complaining about anti-feminists and you're like, well, I'm kind of anti-feminist. I'm very critical. And for myself, I don't even refer to myself as anti-feminist. I can meet a feminist on the street. I have no issues with that. What I have issues with is when they try to call shots on my thoughts or behaviors.
Yeah. It's
Right.
a lot like religion when you're coming into I don't mind what people believe as long as they're not trying to enforce that in law against me.
Absolutely.
As long as there's not requirements for me to adhere to certain aspects of your religion that you believe are right.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
that's the biggest issue, is that like a lot of feminists and social justice warriors have moralized their arguments to the point where you have to demonize the people who don't agree with you. So
Or dehumanize, even, like, not just
Yeah.
demonize, but like just like rob them of their humanity in a lot of cases.
demons aren't human.
Well, that's a matter of opinion. But anyways, now you have a similar experience with religion too, don't you? Was it the Unitarians or
International Church of Christ.
International Church of Christ?
Yeah, I
So-
call them a cult. I do believe that they're a cult, but I like to call cults control groups. Simply because whenever you call something a cult, automatically people think of, like, literally people are sacrificing things like, or Scientology or something like that. But, there's levels of being a cult, and I do believe that what I was involved in was more of a lighter control religion. That's easier to leave. I just want to give respect to people who actually go through worse things than I went through. It was controlling and manipulative, but it wasn't as bad as even like the Jehovah's Witnesses or Mormons in my book. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, my own experience with religion is from the ages of about 12 to 16, I was hooked in by evangelicals. I went to church every Sunday. I was an usher. I did the whole 9 yards. And what happened to me is I went to what they called Bible boot camp, right? So it was a summer camp, and I'd been to other summer camps related to this church before, and everything was fine. We had fun. There was a lot of camping. There was a lot of like capture the flag, great things for kids. You know what I mean? And but this is the first one that ever had revivals. And people, and what really got me was, as I'm sitting there, and this preacher, pastor, like I guess he spent some time in jail in Cuba for preaching a little bit too much. And when he got out, he came out and he started doing this tour and just kind of preaching to all these kids. And the guilt, he would lay it on so thick, like the whole, like, Jesus Christ died for your sins. Don't you feel guilty? You should be feeling guilty. And then all of a sudden, there would be girls and boys, like to the left of me and the right of me, falling on the floor, speaking in tongues. And I'm like, what is going on?
this?
What is happening? I have never seen this before. This is freaking me right out, And I actually had a basic grasp of psychology at the time. So when I was about 16, I had a very basic grasp of psychology, and I understood what hysteria was. And it clicked in, and I was like, this is hysteria. They're literally so racked with guilt that they're doing this to try to like just get like cast off the shackles, so to speak, right? So that was my own experience, and like not long after that, I went on a little like, maybe I should try these different religions. Maybe I should check out Buddhism. Maybe I should check out even Wicca for a little while there, and like occultism and stuff like that.
Wicca, wow.
Wicca, yeah. But it was more of a passing interest. I didn't really take any of it seriously. But But then after a while, I was just like, you know what? And for the past 15 years or so, it's just I've been agnostic atheist, right? In that, like, I don't think there's a God, but I don't know. There's no way to really know.
I kind of find the agnostic redundant.
You think so?
Yeah, I think that you know, somebody can call themselves agnostic if they really want to emphasize the fact that they don't know. But I think that agnostic is a really redundant term. That everyone should be an agnostic atheist.
Mm-hmm.
If they're an atheist, they should be an agnostic atheist if they're intellectually honest. Period.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Fair enough.
So.
And but yeah, so time moved on from there, and then entered the feminism area of my life. Now I was actually seeing a woman for about 2 years in my early 20s who was feminist, right? And relationship was actually absolutely fine. Like there's actually nothing wrong with the relationship. But what ended up happening is the chemistry wasn't there. We broke up. And I found out about a year and a half. Now, this woman is probably one of the most feminine women I've ever dated, right? Like cutesy voices all the time, just like glaringly feminine. And she decided at some point later that she was a lesbian, which fine, whatever. That's her call, right? But then she decided that she was a man, and then it wasn't that she was a man anymore. And now she was a two-spirit something or other. I you know, it's hard to keep track of.
She opened up a Tumblr account or something?
She opened up a Tumblr account, essentially.
Oh, she did?
Well, no, not literally.
Oh, okay. That was a joke, but the way you said it, I was all like, for real? Okay.
Well, no, she just went right down the line, and I'm watching this, and like I didn't quite understand. Like I get transgenderism, that's fine, but she never, the entire time we were dating, had any like inclination towards that, right? Like she was very pro LGBT, which was absolutely fine. Right, but it was the whole like all of a sudden, oh well, I'm a man now. Oh well, I'm a two-spirit, which I understand it is a gender signifier that only Native Americans can use. But she was half Indian, like from Indian, right?
And you were saying that you suffered some issues with the end of the relationship that kind of pushed you towards criticizing feminism.
That wasn't her. That was the next girlfriend.
Oh, okay.
That was the next girlfriend. We dated for about 6 months. About 3 months in, here's the weird thing. She was brilliant. Like she was absolutely brilliant, but not in a good way, right? And I'm talking in the extremely manipulative, extremely emotionally blackmailing kind of way. And when I started dating her, I was already at a really low point in my life. I was depressed. There's a lot of things going on that I just couldn't make sense of. And she started probably about 3 months into the relationship. She started cheating on me, and I would just forgive her because and this is my own fault, right? But I was emotionally kind of like tied to her a little too much. And then came the throwing things at my head, the pots and pans, the nails down the back on my neck and on my face and in my eyes at some points. And one day, about 6 months, this is actually the end of the relationship. At about 6 months into the relationship, she went too far, and she was beating me over the head. And I finally stood up, and I stood up for myself. And all I did was, she came to slap me. I grabbed her by the wrist and I pushed her back, and I went like this, and I said, I'm done. This is finished, right? And I went to turn around. She grabbed my cell phone, which was my very first cell phone too, that I never even got back. She grabbed my cell phone, ran out the door, and I felt bad because I'm like, oh shoot, you know, like I pushed her. I shouldn't have done that, and I followed her. Yeah, I scared her, right? And I pushed her, and I shouldn't have done that. And you know, so I followed her, trying to say, hey, like, come back, let's talk about this, let's talk, right? And she called the police, and I didn't realize this. So when the police showed up, I was like, what's going on? Like, I had marks down the side of my neck, I had bruises, I had the whole 9 yards. I had a big goose egg in the back of my head where she hit me with a pan, right? And I was the one that did all the cooking too, so I mean. But
at least if you're going to get all that abuse, you should at least have someone cooking.
Yeah, exactly, right. And what ended
Apparently,
up
she didn't know her place, so I'm just kidding.
Oh yeah. But yeah, so when the police came, and this was the most telling thing for me. This is what set me off on a like, why did this happen kind of thing. I got arrested. I got sentenced to 2 years conditional sentence based on anger management classes. Now I haven't lost my temper since I was probably about 15, 16 years old. Right. I have actually an excellent command over my temper. Because I know how bad my temper can get if I lose it, right? I worked security for most of my 20s, and I never once lost my temper, even though I was getting into violent situations on a monthly basis, right? And so they sent me to these anger management classes that I did not need, and I actually resented because I was like, I'm not an angry person. Like I'm trying to speak my mind here. I'm trying to do this. I get irritated sometimes, but never really like. And the police report, which actually I still have, the police report, it listed everything that she had said, but not a word of what I had said. Right. And that's what was like, wait, what? Like this officer didn't even take my side of the thing. So the judges that were like, or
could only go off of what she said as opposed to what you said in that situation.
Exactly. So I got pulled away in handcuffs. Now my arresting officer, he was actually pretty cordial. He was pretty polite. He was like telling me what was going on, when it was going on. I asked him like, do I have to have the cuffs behind my back? Can I just wear them in front? He's like, no, it has to be behind your back. It has to be this. And I'm like, okay, fine. And I'm telling him jokes on the way in because I'm thinking like, okay, this will just be over in a little bit. Right. And little did I realize I was in for 2 years of a conditional sentence, right? I never, I spent 3 hours inside of a holding cell, but beyond that, I never saw a day inside a jail cell, but I had to report to a probation officer. I had to.
Oh, okay. I was thinking, yeah. I was a little bit confused there. So basically the condition was that you had to go and talk to a probation officer, but you didn't actually have to sit in a cell.
No.
Okay.
It was, I go and talk to a probation officer and I have to take these classes, right? And it made it very difficult because like at that time, like I didn't have, like I barely knew anybody in the city that I was living in at the time. I barely knew anybody. And what ended up happening is I wanted to move here to Vancouver Island. And they at first would not let me. They were like, no, you have to stay here. I'm like, there's nothing for me here. I don't have a job here. I don't have anything. If I go over to the Vancouver Island, I have a job. I have a group of friends. I have a support network, something that I can like rely on, right? And it took a lot of like cajoling. And finally, in the end, I was just like, you know what? I don't care what they say. I'm going to the island. And they almost tried to throw me in for that until I talked to the probation officer out here. And I was like, look, nothing was happening for me out there. I need to stay here. Right. And then they were like, well, okay, all right. But, you know, we got to talk about this and rah, rah, rah. But yeah. But anyways, 2 years later, I got my pardon and, you know, that was fine, but it made it very difficult for me especially in terms of relationships, because like, how do you fully go back to trusting somebody right off the bat. Right. And it's just, it just was not good. It was not a good
also people
situation.
Trusting you. I mean, when you're accused of something like battering a woman or raping a woman or something like that, automatically, even me, you know, understanding from my standpoint, you know, if I knew that somebody was accused of rape, I would be a lot more careful, period. Even if they were never actually convicted. Yeah. You know, so it's always, it kind of just messes with your life and people's opinions of you.
And in some ways it did burn down some of my friendships. She was also like, she was very good at, you know, talking up a good game. Right. So pretty much anybody that was friends with her, all of a sudden they were literally gunning for me in some cases. Right. Because this wasn't the nicest crowd in the world. Right. And like even some of my friends were a little bit questionable in terms of their morals. But then that's why I had to come back to Vancouver Island, because people here knew me. They'd known me for years. They knew that I wasn't that kind of person. And I needed to be around people that knew me for what I was. Right. And that definitely put a strain on a few of my old friendships. I actually ended up regaining some of them. Right. Which was definitely a plus. They're friends I've had for years. Right. It was, it would definitely, for about 5 years, it took me 5 years to dig myself out of that whole, like, you know, emotional kind of turmoil and everything that was going on, where I couldn't trust anybody and I couldn't, you know, like I was depressed again. And about 5 years, I finally You know, I'm like, all right, I need to start dating again. So I started dating again, and it went actually great. It was like that relationship absolutely went fine. Didn't last much longer than about 8 months, but it was still, but it was actually probably one of the better relationships I've had.
It was a healthy relationship.
It was.
You knew where to put the boundaries. That's the thing about
absolutely.
When you're in an abusive situation, the most important thing getting back into a relationship situation is understanding healthy boundaries and who's a safe person. And I kind of feel like women are, talk about those kinds of things, but I don't ever hear men talking about who safe people are, and how to figure out what women to trust.
That was actually one of the biggest like eye-opening points for me on this whole thing is I realized that the psychological effects of abuse were the same no matter what gender you were. Mm-hmm. Right, because I was going through the same thing, constantly blaming myself. It was my fault. But the more I thought about it, the more I couldn't figure out. Like, wait, what did I do to cause this? Mm-hmm. The fight that resulted in my arrest was actually she was concerned that I might watch porn while she went to her mom's for the weekend.
What?
And I was just like, we have sex like 3 times a day. Like, I'm pretty sure I can go a couple of days. It's okay, right?
But even so, watching porn?
Yeah. Well,
like, that was a big deal for... I mean, I guess I can understand, like, if somebody's, like, religious or something.
She wasn't. She wasn't at all. She was just really insecure, is what it boils down to. But yeah, so she straight up asked me, like, oh, while I'm away at my mom's, are you going to watch porn? And I'm like, probably not. But she somehow took probably not. And those are my exact words too, probably not. She took that to mean absolutely yes. The second you're out that door, I'm on it. Right. This is the same kind of girl where like I remember one night we were walking back from a restaurant, and across the street there's like a 6-lane street, right? So like on the other side of the street there's some girl in a short like schoolgirl skirt walking up the street, right? And I glance over and I glance back. I don't even think anything of it, right? It's like I'm not even checking her out. I'm just glancing across the street, and all of a sudden, who's that? I don't know. Are you sleeping with her? What are you talking about? Like, I have no idea who that is. Why did you look then? You must know her if you look. Like, no. Like, I
think women don't I think a lot of women don't understand, or they're not taught the way that men work when it comes to those things. Like, you see a sexy woman walk by and you're gonna look and you're gonna think about it, but as soon as she walks away, she's like out of your mind. Like, you're not thinking about her unless you're extremely unhappy with your own relationship. But that's like I don't know. Like, why would you be threatened just by a look? It's not like you're going after her.
I like the wisdom of my elders kind of thing, right? I'm very big on the wisdom that my grandparents could impart upon me. And one of the things that my grandmother told me before she died, and I'll always remember this, is that if he's turning his head, I know he's not chasing. You know, right? Like, if he's looking, it's because
he's not pretending.
Exactly.
He's not faking. He's not doing anything different than what he would if he's not in front of you.
If he's because her opinion is if he stops looking, then there's something to worry about.
Yeah.
Right.
Because he's trying to hide something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. And so anyway, so that whole thing went down, and it wasn't until a couple of years later that I kind of discovered the wider like men's rights community, right? And absolutely, the thing is like I will agree with some things in terms of shives. Is there is a part of that community that is blatantly misogynistic, and I can't fucking deal with those guys.
Did you hear about what happened with Rush V?
Yeah, actually, it was big news in my city. Literally, it was weird because I went into the office and all of a sudden, the whole office is talking about Rush V, and I'm like, why are you guys talking about internet stuff? What the fuck's going on?
Yeah.
No, they're pro-rape, and I'm like, okay. And I was familiar with that article. Like, I'm not. First of all, I'm not.
Tell me about that though, because honestly, I don't know very much about Rush V. I've heard his name thrown around when it comes to like red pill kind of stuff. But the article, I heard that he was saying it was satirical, but it was very, very. It's kind of like Poe's Law. Like, he didn't make it enough of a satirical piece for me to really be sure that it was a satirical piece.
Well,
especially the things that he was talking about. I don't know. It was very interesting.
Well, I saw there was a stream with him and Karen Strawn. This is a couple of weeks ago, right? And they were actually discussing that article and what the general understanding between those two, and like honestly, I never actually read the article. Okay, so I'm going to put that right out there right now. I never actually read the article, but I was familiar with the article. I was familiar with what he was positing, but I was always under the impression that it was satire from when I first heard about it, right? Because that's how people were explaining it to me, that it was satire, right? But what I understand is that the disclaimer, that this is a satirical disclaimer, didn't go up until the day that the media was like, wait a second, these guys are having meetups in all over the world in our cities and stuff like that, right? And during that live stream with Karen Strawn, they were very clear, like, yeah, this is satire, right? Now, I'm not a fan of Roosh V's kind of. I view it as like the very manipulative end of the pickup artist community, right? Yeah. And I don't think the whole community is manipulative at all, because I've seen this one guy, David D'Angelo. Now he calls himself a pickup artist, but he preaches a lot about like personal growth, like just improve yourself, constantly improve yourself.
I think I know who you're talking about. He's the one who's from England and had so basically a feminist documentary was trying to come out, and they were interviewing them, and halfway through kind of looking at the stuff, they found out that it was going to be criticizing them the entire time, so they tried to back out, but they used their stuff anyway or something, so they had to come out with I forgot who they are, but like I really liked a lot of their stuff. Like as a woman, I looked at it and I was just like, this is really cool for people who like this kind of stuff. Like for me, I would just say, hey, like I don't like, I'm not interested, and walk away. But for some women, that would be really flattering to have somebody come up to them and smooth talk them. You know what I mean? Like knowing that that's where it's going to go. Like everybody knows that that's what they want. It's not like it's not like a secret, you know? Yeah. So if that's the behavior that you're displaying.
I don't think, because David D'Angelo is not British.
Yeah, okay.
So I don't think it's the same guy here. But David D'Angelo, he's very much like self-improvement, like go to the gym, work out, learn how to tell a good joke, things like that, right? Like and stuff that like men and women actually both respond to really well, conversational skills, things like that, right? Because what he sees is in his words, an epidemic of men who just don't know how to interact with women.
Yes.
And I firmly believe that. Like I live in a city of 80,000 people, and we're called the most lonely city in Canada. Okay, because 88% of our city is single, whereas something close to 60 to 62% is female. Right. So there's a lot of single people in this city, and it's, once again, it's like the loneliest city. They call it the best place to find a date, but the thing is what they don't realize is that most people are not, well versed in how to interact. And this goes for women too. I know plenty of women out in this city who have no idea how to properly interact with men, and vice versa.
Can I comment on that?
Yeah, by all means.
I think in part this is a consequence of us walking away from traditional gender roles.
I agree.
It's a huge, not that I think that because traditional gender roles aren't good for me. Like for me personally, I have a really strong personality. I'm a very dominant person. It's very difficult in a relationship for me to find someone who's like, I would not do very well in a relationship where I'd have to be a submissive person staying at home and doing things. Like one time I had mentioned to my friends that like I might be a stay-at-home mom, and everybody laughed because everybody knows that like after 2 days I'm just going to be like, what am I doing? Like I'm not producing anything. I need to go out. I need to make money, that kind of thing. So, but I do understand that the traditional gender roles gave people a formula as to how to interact with each other. And for all the faults that it had, what it did have was kind of a way of, it was a structure of teaching people how to interact with each other and relate to each other. Now, I kind of feel like we need to try to find a better structure to build up, because we've done a lot of tearing down. And the problem is that no matter what structure you posit, there's all these people saying, no, that's going to put people into gender roles. There's this fear of roles. There's this fear of standards. There's this fear of structure that among progressives, they just fear, these extreme progressives really fear structure, and it just blows my mind that they would think that structure itself is the bad thing.
Yeah.
You know, whereas I'm like, well, there's parts of the structure that we don't like from the old structure, but we need to start building up a new structure, otherwise we're not going to have a house.
I've actually taken to calling them the deconstructionists. Simply because that's what they do, is they try to subvert and deconstruct what we have.
Yeah.
But they're not doing a very good job at replacing it with something that works, right? Now
that and I think it's more of like they're not happy with what they have. It's kind of like you're trying to build a brick house, and every time you lay down a brick on one end of the wall, you say, oh, the other end of the wall isn't good enough, I could straighten that out. And so you take that brick out and you put it back.
Yeah.
You know, so you're always trying to reorganize, so it's going to take forever to get anything done. And once you're done, you're not going to like the house that you end up with.
And that's pretty much it, right?
So
now, my own opinion on traditional gender roles is I don't think we should have to like stick to traditional gender roles, right? But we should be able to accept when people want to choose that. You know, and I think that's the main thing, is it boils down to personal choice. I was actually just having this conversation with a friend yesterday, and we were talking about like these new amalgamated gender roles that we've got going, with all these different like trans identities and all these different like things like that, right? My daughter goes to school with like when I went to school, there was one trans kid in the whole school, right? And we all loved him. Right, he was actually funny as hell. Like he was a great guy. You know, he did deal with his fair share of discrimination and whatnot, right? But he had a lot of support. He had a lot of backup, right? Now in my daughter's school, like she tells me that there's like at least 2 in every class, right? And I'm like, that's, you know, really interesting to me, because like the question then becomes like, were there always that many and they were just too afraid to come out, or is there something else that's like pushing this kind of culture forward, right? But in terms of traditional gender roles, is I think we need to respect when people want to be a stay-at-home mom, but we also need to respect when they don't want, like when they actually want to, you know, take on a more traditionally masculine role. You know, like they want to be a construction worker, or you know, they want to be an infantry soldier, you know, that kind of thing.
If they're capable.
Absolutely, yeah. That's the thing. They have to be physically capable of it, right? Because I'm not going to go out there into the desert and get shot and then look at my partner and be like, "You can't lift me." Shit. I'm dead. You know, like.
I mean, that could happen anyway, but even
for sure.
You know. And I was having a conversation with someone the other day about military service and women, and just talking about how, in my mind, not that I think that women should be barred from military service, even front line if they're capable, but there are studies that show that women on the front line, even the strongest and most capable of women, are not capable of, or are hardly capable of the same thing as the least capable men who are allowed to be on the front line.
I think I've
but
actually
that's a
read
different
that study.
conversation. But but people don't. I think when people talk about these things, they don't focus a whole lot on the ways that men and women interact in group settings. Like literally, men. I do a lot of thing in male-dominated environments. Like I do Muay Thai and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, a lot of MMA and stuff, and I've always done a lot of martial arts and sports and things like that. And so it's just, you can see a stark difference in the way that classes where there's mostly males, and the way where classes, like I have a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu class that I take. I take the normal class, and then I also take the women's class because I feel like I learn better. Some things better in the women's class. But it's because of the way that we interact. It's going to be a little bit different. If you're going to be in a male-dominated environment, you have to adopt some of the male way of interacting. And some of it has to do with hierarchy, for instance. Women, I don't feel that women do as well with hierarchy. We value equality, and we value certain things. But literally, like, I'll be fighting, like, I'll be working, like, on some moves with a woman, and the entire time she's telling me what I should be doing better. And I feel like she expects that out of me. This equality of like, let's critique each other and do this and talk about this like the entire time. And I'm just all like, shut up. I want to focus on punching this bag. And so it's just a different way of interacting, a different way of thinking about social interactions that I think that people ignore when we're talking about mixed like frontline military work. You know, there has to be a certain amount of structure that I feel like men are better at, hierarchical structure.
It's interesting. You should bring that up. I like my original career background was in security, right?
Yeah.
I was a bouncer for a few years. I've worked. I've even done like personnel security, which I don't suggest. That is so structuralized and rigid. Like it is so by the book. You step one, and that's what happened. And I stepped out of line and I lost the job. But it's a very masculine, masculine oriented industry, where like how tough you are has a lot to do with what positions you're going to get and all that kind of stuff. Even bouncing, it's technically we're not supposed to call us bouncers, we're supposed to call us doormen, right? But even that is like you need to be able to put the tough guy act on, right? And all that kind of stuff. And then what happened is I got hit by a car a few years back, and I couldn't do that anymore. Right. So I couldn't rely on my own back and whatnot. So I started working in an office at a tow truck company. And so all the guys that are on the road, and it's mostly male. So that is a very male oriented aspect of it. But I was working in the office, right? Because once again, my back, I can't do any heavy lifting, all that kind of stuff. Right. So when I got put in the office, when I first got put in there, I was one of two men in the entire office. It was all completely dominated by women, right? And I noticed that there is a bit of a hierarchy there in terms of seniority, right? But whereas the male drivers, their seniority works on experience based. It's very experience based. Like they defer to the guys that have been there longer because they're more experienced, right? But those guys that were more experienced, they still didn't go around barking orders, right? But what I found in the office, and this is all anecdotal, mind you, so it's not.
It's okay to talk about anecdotal situations as long as you're not using that to extrapolate upon further.
No.
And to me, I assume that your experiences are anecdotal and that you're using it as one data point until you start trying to use that as an elaboration.
Exactly. So. And what I found is that, while the men would have a lot more patience, and this might even be just a male, because I'm male and they're female kind of thing, right? The men would have a lot more patience and they would sit there and they would go through it over with you. But I found that it was almost zero tolerance when I made a mistake in the office, right? Even when I was still getting used to it, even when I was still learning, it was zero tolerance.
With women or with men?
With women.
Oh.
With women, and it took me 3 years it was about 3 years in the office before they realized, like, oh, okay, no, he knows as much as any of us now, right? And I stopped getting that, and I all of a sudden felt like, I'm like, hey, okay, cool, I belong here now. This is good. This is great. But now I have a good rapport going with my entire company, essentially, right? So it works out. But it was really interesting how I kind of like saw that dynamic kind of shift and change, because I went from like being a completely male-oriented industry to coming over, and then all of a sudden being like all my seniors were women, right? So I was just like, this is like, and it was not a big deal. I didn't really think much of it, but there were definitely different behaviors that I noticed on how they would interact with each other versus how they would.
It is really different. It's really interesting because I find when I'm working with women, I have to do a lot of saying, I know, I understand, I know, I got it. But when I'm working with men, like, they just wait for me to fuck up. Like, they say, do this, and then I do it, and then I fuck up or I don't. And then, like, when I fuck up, it's just all like, okay, do it better next time. And I'm like, okay, I got it. I know where I'm at. You know, that kind of thing. So I kind of feel like women are very, like, hands-on when it comes to managing, and very, like, particular. Whereas, like, with men, I've seen a lot more men be more hands-off in my work environments. Like, does that make sense?
It totally does. I've also noticed that the men are very malleable with their work environment, right? So for like just something as simple as like a poster up on the wall in the garage, right? They're very malleable. It doesn't care. You can put up a new poster, you can tear one down, put another one up. It's nothing, right? But I've noticed in the office, if you put up, because we like to, every once in a while, we'll put up like a little funny saying or a little comic strip or something like that up on the wall, right? But they're very controlling about what goes up. And like certain things will stay up for months. So
no like naked ladies,
no, like just I had a like I had a little comic strip of a little dog, and it's just like this little tiny like Scottish Terrier in one of his little beds, and he's got a little thought bubble coming up saying, "Today I'm going to be magnificent," and I thought it was funny, right? So I put it up on the wall, right next to where everything else was, and then the next day it was gone, and I'm like, well, what's going on, right? You got like pictures of like other little comic strips that have to do with kids and whatever, right? And so that really said something to me. I was just like, like either they don't get my sense of humor, or like it's they're controlling their environment. And considering the fact that like, because I'm the graveyard guy there now, right? Full-time graveyard supervisor, and so basically whatever environment I set up during the night, the next night it's gone, right? So I don't know, it's all very, it's like I don't know what to make of it, but it's just interesting nonetheless.
Yeah. I like behavioral studies. I like thinking about the differences between the ways men and women do things, because it's not necessarily wrong.
No.
But when we're discussing things like the wage gap and women in the workforce, men and women in the workforce, and how we're going to try to get women to have have similar outcomes as men, like how are we going to make sure that they're able to get certain jobs with the skills that they have? Because we do want women in the workforce.
Absolutely.
Like, we have to also have a discussion about how we're going to create a dynamic that's beneficial for both. Because we don't want to exclude one for the other. And the problem is that in a lot of these discussions about men and women or men and women's rights, we focus on either one or the other. Yeah. It's kind of like Karen Strawn. I listened to one of her things. She's the one, Girl Writes What, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So someone mentioned her and sent me a couple things from her, and I watched this one where she was talking about how like when England was trying to give women the option of going out and working and owning their money that they bring in, right? What they did was they gave them the full rights over whatever money they earn. But they didn't take away the responsibilities that men had to pay for and be responsible for her. So she could go off and get into debt and then make $600. Yeah. And then he could not take her $600 to pay off the debt that she got into, because it was her money, but he's still responsible for her debt. So certain things like that. And I kind of feel like if we're not careful, if we focus on women and on women's needs and what we feel like women need, what we're going to do is set up similar situations as we did back then. Like, not quite as drastic, because we don't have as drastic of rules that require, because we have more freedoms for both, I feel like, than we did back then. It was definitely more structural back then. But we may set up a situation in which we benefit women and force men to sacrifice for that, and not take away some of the responsibilities that men have. And that's my biggest issue with a lot of these reforms. Like, I agree that there does need to be certain reforms, and I also agree that there is discrimination to an extent in the workforce. Like, I do think that there is a different way that men and women are thought of when it comes to how we produce things. And a part of that has to do with the fact that we do produce things differently. We do have different attitudes and thoughts towards work. This Pew poll here that I'm reading about the wage gap is fascinating, because it talks hugely about the attitudes that men and women have, not only towards the wage gap, but towards their work. Okay. Like literally, it's you
should
like
send me a link to that if you can.
Yeah. It's a huge amount. It was, let me find this number. It was a fascinating thing that I saw, that I was reading. So basically, and I can't find it right now, I must not have highlighted it, but basically, what the study said was that a good amount of people think that there's discrimination. Like about 50% of women believe that there's discrimination against women in the workforce. But it was like 72 to 80% of women have never experienced it, or think that that's not their job, that they've never had that happen in their job.
It's the perception.
Yeah. And I kept thinking, and I don't know if this is the case, because the polls were talking about people's opinions and thoughts about the discrimination. A huge part of the poll. One of the things that it talked about was the difference between the attitudes about discrimination, gender discrimination in the workforce, with people who are college educated as opposed to not college educated. And it's a lot more likely for a college educated male or female to think that there's gender discrimination in the workforce than a non-college educated person. So it was fascinating to me, and I can't make this assumption, but it seems to me that people who are college educated may be more likely to think that because that's what they're told, right? And so what seems to be happening in some cases, that people are coming out of these college environments, going into the work environment, not experiencing discrimination in their own workforce, but still believing that happens in huge amounts, that people are believing these things. And it's fascinating because I don't know how to prove that, and I don't know how to figure out how likely that is, but it does seem like a good explanation as to why these polls have a certain level of, like, why there's more people who think that discrimination happens to other people as opposed to themselves in their own workplace.
There's an interesting anecdote I could throw into this too.
Okay.
A friend of my daughter's. Now, my daughter is really well known as the one who's very critical of, like, a lot of the social justice stuff that goes on in her school, right? Mm-hmm. She's very, like, pro-trans, right? She's very pro-LGBT. Like she agrees with them on a lot of the concepts, right? But she does not agree, and I'm with her on a lot of this, with the methods that they're choosing to enforce these things. Right. Mm-hmm. Like I'm anti-racism, but I don't think that, this whole, like, hierarchical structure of how racism works, I don't think that's a good way to fight it. Right. Mm-hmm. Now a friend of hers, she's had conversations with about sexism, about all this kind of stuff. And she, like, literally, her grade 12 year, just before she went off to college, she was just like, you know what? I don't think I've ever been discriminated against. I don't think I've ever experienced, like, real sexism. Like, I've, a sexist joke once in a while, who cares? Right. But I've never experienced any of that. And then literally her first week at university, and she's going off about, like, how the wage gap is 63 cents. And I'm like, okay, I heard 77. I've heard 92. I've heard, like, where is it?
63.
63 cents. And this is from her sociology class, right? And she's adamant about it now. No, there's a wage gap. No, there's a wage gap. And I'm like, well, like, I'm not an economist. I'm not well versed in this. I can only go by what smarter people than me have told me, right? Mm-hmm. But my understanding of it is it's heavily oriented around choice, and some professions are more valuable than other professions in terms of, like, petroleum engineering versus social work, mm-hmm. like that sort of thing, right? Which we know that a vastly higher amount of men are getting into petroleum engineering, and a vastly higher amount of women are getting into social work, mm-hmm. right? Just from the numbers and whatnot. So it was very interesting to me that, like, her grade 12, this girl's grade 12 year, she was, like, flat out like, yeah, no, like, I have seen sexism against men, and this, that, and the next thing, and then just doing a total flip, right? Mm. The other thing that really concerns me, and this is about colleges all across Canada for the most part, right? But our local university here is University of Victoria. Okay, there's that. Yeah, Freakonomics. Yeah, I've actually listened to that podcast.
Yeah, that's really good. Anyway.
Yeah. And there is a men's group on campus, right? Which when I first heard, I was like, holy cow! Like, this is great, because I've heard of like Ryerson University in Toronto. There, they tried to start a men's group, and they got shut down because the feminist group didn't feel safe.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh my God, there's men talking about men's issues. I'm sorry, but what's not to feel safe? what's dangerous about that? I don't understand. Anyway, so I heard there's a men's group. I'm like, oh, right on. And a guy I know through a lot of this Gamergate mess, he goes to UVic, and he was telling me, like, yeah, don't get your hopes up on that. I'm like, well, what do you mean? He's just like, all they do is they sit around and talk about toxic masculinity and how to like, and I'm like, really?
Oh, so it's a feminist men's
It's a
group.
feminist men's
Oh
group.
my God. What?
Yeah. So, and what really bothers me is like, I can go into these places and I can say, you know, like I absolutely agree. There are certain aspects of masculinity that can be toxic, right? But it's not as a rule. It's just, it depends on how the individual treats it. Like a lot of this Roosh v alpha male bullshit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right. And that can be toxic, and absolutely, you know, the violence first. And I've been in that culture. I know exactly what it's all about. Right. But a lot of it is based on honor, and a lot of it's based on your word and how well you can be trusted. Right. Now,
and the cool thing about that is that, you know, you can use those natural tendencies for men to want to seek after the honorable position to be in, to put them into situations where they can be fulfilled in that way that are positive. And that's the problem with the idea of toxic masculinity, is that people speak as if there's something fundamentally wrong with the way that or the extremes of masculinity, and I don't think so. I think that there's fundamentally wrong with something fundamentally wrong with certain ways in which we have told men to be extreme in their masculinity. You know, I think that someone can be extremely masculine and not be toxic whatsoever.
Yep.
You know?
No, I agree. I absolutely agree. Right. And then that's because like I've seen, like I've got a lot of experience with bikers, essentially.
Yeah.
Right. So Hell's Angels, that kind of type. Right. And a lot of the times the thing is there definitely is that element that's like the 1% that goes out and like makes victims of everybody around them. Right. There is that element in there. But the vast majority of the ones that I've met are completely honorable people. Like they would never harm anybody who didn't, you know, have it coming, right? They would never victimize anyone. They would never steal from somebody who was worse off than them. There, you know, there's a very strict code of like honor, and like a very strict. And if you break this code, you will be essentially booted from the club, and that's not a club you want to be booted from, you know. So, so like seeing like the worst of like toxic masculinity in terms of like biker gangs and stuff like that. Like these guys would give you the shirt off you can be a complete stranger, and if they see that you're in need, they'll help you. Right. And there is that element that, and I think that is a positive aspect of you know, hyper masculinity too, is the need to want to provide, help, and care for, you know. So, and like I'm a single father, right? Like I take care of my kid pretty much on my own. Her mom's out in Ontario, and they're going through their own issues right now. So I've kind of taken the reins, right? But I have a great relationship with my daughter. You know, speaking of which,
Hey.
hi, Celise. Hello. But and as a result of that, you know, like I go around and like there have been people, especially on the internet, like I've been doing the YouTube thing for a while, and I'll once in a while I'll come across comments that are like putting me on blast and just criticizing me. And some of these people are like, oh, we should be calling CPS on this guy because, you know, because he's got a daughter. That's horrible. You know, he's brainwashing her. He's making a victim out of her. And I'm like, what are you talking about? If anything, it's the other way around.
I mean, is she not a smart individual?
Oh,
She can come up to her
she's-
own. Like every father and mother has influence over their children, but ultimately, like anybody who's ever had a child knows that their child's going to do what they're going to do anyway.
Yeah.
Like despite your influence, and sometimes because of your influence, they will just be all like, "Fuck you, I'm doing my own thing."
Yeah.
So like, come on, that's hilarious.
No,
Like I can
it's
understand like there's certain ways of brainwashing people, but I see that in religious organizations, and I don't see that. Like there are ways to brainwash children into believing what you want them to believe, but that usually has to do with putting kids into communities where they cannot have exposure to other people's ideas. As long as they have exposure to other people's ideas, parents should be able to influence their child in the way that they think. So
I'm very I'm a very liberal parent, I guess is the way to put it. You know, like I like her to have her freedom. I like her to be able to go and like just let me know where you're going. Go do it. It's no biggie. You need some money, let me know in advance so I can actually get the money together. You know, like that sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
And it just blew my mind when I see people say, "Oh, we should call CPS." First of all, she's 18. There's nothing they can do.
Yeah.
Second of all, we don't have CPS in Canada. We have child welfare, right? And they're not going to do anything because again, she's 18, right? Mm-hmm. And but it absolutely blew my mind. I'm like, what was it that I said that was so wrong that you think that I should have my child taken from me? You know, and you know, I racked my brain, and the reality is like it goes right back to like when you were referring to the Universal International Church of Christ?
Yeah,
it's very cult like. It's very like they can't see beyond their ideology, essentially.
It's very moralizing. It's like I was saying before. It's very much like moralizing the argument, like moralizing the ideas. Like if you don't have this idea that we have, therefore you're not a moral person, and you cannot possibly treat other people with respect and dignity. And it really is a blind spot, and it's really a shame. And not all progressives are like that. Like I was hanging out with a friend yesterday, and I know you know this, but I was just hanging out with a friend yesterday who works for a progressive think tank here in DC. And he had not really encountered a whole lot of these types of people. And he is a very well-balanced person. And of course we have our disagreements about you know, about the wage gap and things like that I need to look into further, because I feel like he has more of a grasp on certain, with the numbers and things like that, because that's what he studied. But at any rate, he was completely on board with me talking about how these extreme progressive peoples aren't, for instance, allowing the diversity of intellectual diversity on campuses.
It's not about creating an intellectual space. It's about creating a home here.
Yeah. Then he was just talking about, like, he had a really reasonable response to that. And we were just talking about how, like, if you don't create a space in which bad ideas can or what you consider bad ideas to propagate, it's going to go to the other extreme. They're not going to be criticized, so they're going to kind of fester underneath the surface until it comes to a boil, because you're not addressing this issue. And that's the biggest issue that I have, is I'm not a conservative. I'm not an uber conservative. Some of my ideas are conservative, but I don't believe in things like trickle-down economics. I don't think that you know, gays shouldn't get married in the United States. That's where conservatives are like, gays can't get married, but whatever. Like, I don't believe in these things, but because you're not willing to speak about these issues, I have to go to the people who are willing to speak about these issues, who have bad ideas attached to their willingness to speak about these issues. And you don't want that to happen.
And that's actually the kicker. That's the kicker right there. You know, I follow a lot of Milo Yiannopoulos, for instance, right? Yeah. I disagree with him on so much, but because he's one of the only people who's actually talking about this,
that's why people like him.
That's why people like him.
He's a total douche. Like I hate him, but I have to like him. I can't not like him. I don't know why. And
that's that's exactly it, right? Like I would actually consider myself somewhat progressive as well, right? Like I'm definitely on the left end of the spectrum, right? But I'm starting to like what's happening with all this is I'm feeling like I'm being pushed further to the right, you know, and like going back to what you said there about the you know, festering and boiling, right? And I absolutely agree with that. Like because I've seen that happen. You know, when you silence certain ideas and when you limit certain people's abilities to speak certain, you know, ideas, essentially, they will cloister and they will, you know, find people who are willing to talk about these things, and it will fester and it will boil and it will spill over, often in ways that, you know, we don't like. Look at the Oklahoma City bombings, you know, Ted Kaczynski, like all this kind of stuff. This is exactly the kind of thing that created that, you know, it's because his ideas weren't able to be properly challenged in an open forum, you know, and this and all this happened, right? I might be going a little bit too deep into that, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
like when they
silencing breeds extremism. As soon as you try to silence somebody in ways other than speaking to them about the issue and showing them that they're wrong on their on intellectually, other than that, like silencing will breed extremism. Like you can see it with I had to study church history. Every time there was massive persecution of a specific religious group or a specific sect of Christianity, that group like would explode. That's what creates persecution. Creates extreme religions. Persecution creates religious growth.
Absolutely.
You know?
I'm the form of atheist that I want people to be able to worship whatever they want, but the second that they go cross a line and start affecting how I think and my behavior, that's too far. I'm sorry, but like that.
I'm an anti-theist. I think that it would be better if our world found if we could find secular means to the same ends that religious that these religious dogmas have. But at the same time, I would prefer to use conversation, ridicule, anything but legislating. I don't want there to be a taboo against them speaking about their issues. I want them to feel comfortable to talk to me about these issues. And I found that to be the best approach in the best cases. You know, like when you're approachable, even though you disagree with someone, automatically that person is a lot more likely to change their views. Just because you are someone who's going to listen, that you're approachable, that you're willing to be wrong. Like automatically you are more likely to be believed in what you say instead of being like antagonistic, no matter how anti-theist you are. You know?
I actually, like, I agree that I think that religion in the long run absolutely needs to be like secularized. Like that's the best way forward for me. I've said this to a number of my friends too when talking about like the case of these the Muslim refugees from like Syria and whatnot, right? And I said that, look, like I have no issues with them coming here, but my problem is with the orthodoxy within it, right? And I know some secularized Muslims, you know, they you know, the guys that shave their beards and they drink alcohol and eat, you know, bacon. They're completely secularized. They still have their own personal faith with, you know, a God or Allah or whoever it is, right? But they're not trying to push this like Sharia on anybody. They're not trying to push, you know, their, you know, rules for life on anybody else. In fact, they're very malleable with their own rules. And I think ultimately that's the best place this needs to go, is like, by all means, have your faith, whatever, right? If you want to believe in that, that's fine. Don't act like it's what everybody needs to believe, because that's when we get into this whole persecution of various peoples and stuff like that. So I am definitely anti-theist in that regard, but I know that that's not going to happen overnight, right? So yeah.
But no matter how secularized you get religions to be, religion is like a dog. Like no dog is a biting dog till it bites, but every dog has a potential to bite. Some religions and some dogs are bigger, so if and when they do bite, that's going to hurt worse and be more damage. Some are less, but they all have the potential to bite. They all have the potential to get people to run off the cliff together, like a herd of sheep. Like, and that's my issue with just secularizing religion. I want to, like, I will literally tell people that I'm talking to who are religious, I'm anti-theist, I am anti-religion. But even after that, we're still able to have that conversation because of the approach that I have. Not that I'm the best at it or anything. I can be really antagonistic too, but like, but that's my biggest issue with that stance, because I really do think that we need to take it a step further and say, no, I need to actively try to when people approach me with their religious ideas, I want to actively disabuse them of those ideas. Not in an antagonistic way, but draw it out and have that conversation, because that's what changes people's minds. You know?
I understand what you're getting at. The question I would have at that point would be how. Now, I've noticed that ever since there's been like an increase in atheism and stuff like that. Now, maybe I might be imagining this, actually. It's maybe completely anecdotal, right? But I've noticed that people are a hell of a lot more like at a loss with what to do with their lives. You know what I mean? I've noticed the one thing that I will give to religion is it tends to give people a sense of purpose, right? And some people absolutely do need that sense of purpose. Otherwise, they go off. Now, I'm not saying that like, oh, religion breeds morals, because that's a ridiculous freaking stance to take, right? But there's definitely something in terms of like life's purpose and whatnot. And I've known people who have been like straight up like the scum of the earth, like will steal from your grandmother and rape your sister kind of people, right? Who have turned that right around by finding Jesus, right? And all the power to them in that case. If that makes them better people, I'm all for that. But so that's the only concern I have with that. Like I agree with you on principle, but there's just there's certain nuances to it that really need to be like explored a little bit.
That is very true. Not everybody is capable of taking care of their own heart issues. That's what I would call it, a heart issue.
Yeah.
A soul issue. There is an aspect of who we are as human beings that wants some kind of ultimate higher purpose. And not having a religion or an easy structure for that purpose can breed a lot of extremes. You know what I mean? Like a lot of people running off into extreme ideologies in other areas. But I think that has more to do with us not knowing what can replace religion in that situation, as opposed to, like, and it is definitely one of those situations. It's definitely one of those things that's really hard to figure out what could replace that kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like, I'm a very self-satisfied person, but I still long for the kind of purpose that I had when I was religious. It's kind of like I kind of feel, and with my disabuse of my religious beliefs, I kind of feel like I was offered $1 million when I turned 18. All my life I thought I was going to get $1 million when I turned 18, and all of a sudden I turned 18 and realized that was a complete bullshit.
Yeah.
Well, I had a lot of plans that and hopes and dreams that hinged on that $1 million. But now that that's gone, I have to figure things out myself, and I'm going to have to live with the disappointment of knowing that I don't have $1 million. And I feel like I don't know what it would be like to try to how I would understand purpose if I had never had religion. But I think that more people would be more prone to being able to find a good purpose if they weren't offered a fake purpose in the first place.
Yeah.
And I think that's more the way that I see that. Absolutely.
Okay. I can agree with that. Simply because I can absolutely relate to that, because I went through the same thing. I thought I had everything.
You still feel it probably too. You still feel pangs of like, what am I doing with my life? Like, where am I going? Like, when I turn 90 and I'm going to have regrets, like those kinds of things. And I'm sure some of those things are normal, but some of those things are definitely exacerbated by the fact that I was told that I had a purpose and a big daddy out there who's going to hug me and love me. And now I'm completely responsible for myself, 100% responsible. I'm an island. As much as other people might want to help me, as close as I can get to someone, I'm the only one who knows my thoughts. No one will understand me. Yeah. Period. And I can accept that. And
you know what? That's just it, right? Like, what I felt after how should I put this? After I left evangelicalism, right? I did away with that, and like when I left evangelicalism, that was like all of Christianity. I was just like, no. Not interested, right? I started kind of like doing a lot of soul searching, trying to figure out who I was, where I was going, and I think everybody kind of goes that to a degree, but I think people who have like been kind of brought up in a religion and then been freed of that at a certain age, I think they go through it a little bit more, because they start looking for purpose, and it's not always in healthy places, right? I got involved in a group. I don't even want to name them, actually. But it was a very ideological oriented group that was taking the fight against Scientology to an extreme. Now, this wasn't anonymous. This was another group entirely, right? But it was skirting like actual breaking laws. It was skirting it. And that's when I was just like, wait a second, what group am I involved in here? What is this? And it was very almost cult-like in its own kind of purpose. And because I was very anti-Scientologist at that point. And I still am, but like now I'm kind of taking a step back and realize like like I don't need to be a freaking terrorist against Scientology. That's not the best way to do this, right? But a lot of these guys, they're literally talking about like, hey, maybe we should bomb a church of Scientology, and I'm like, whoa, where are we going here? What the hell, right? And and then I left that, and then I had an obsession with pretty much a lot of nerd stuff. You know what I mean? I was obsessed with nerd stuff, like fantasy novels and things like that. I would sit there and I'd read, and then I wrote one, right? And but that was always a lifelong goal. I always wanted to be a writer, right? So that was part of that. But like I would get. So that I would say that was probably one of the healthier obsessions that I had over the years. But and then like when Gamergate started, I got obsessed with that, right? And now I'm to the point now where I'm like, wait, taking a step back and realizing that okay, this isn't the end all be all of this. This is definitely, I think they got a really bad rap in the media, right? Mm-hmm. But I don't think that they're as bad as everybody seems to think. Same thing with like Sargon, like a lot of these guys, they get a bad rap, but they're like literally when you listen to what they say, it's just like, well, he's not saying anything really, incendiary. It's just, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I feel like I lost myself there at some point. Could be. I only woke up like an hour and a half ago.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
That's okay.
Pretty much the only time I could do this.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. I think when it comes to the loss of religion and the extremes, we can actually apply that to social justice warriorisms. Mm-hmm. In my experience, the people that I know in real life that are social justice warriors came from very religious backgrounds. One was actually suffered a lot of religious abuse, and the other one not so much. And I've spoken about this before in my, in the live stream that I did with Bacon. Mm-hmm. The lesbian couple that my friend was, my friend's roommates. So basically what seemed to have happened with them is that they came from these extreme religions where they were told what to do and abused and oppressed in a way. And then they came out of that and kind of adopted the social justice warrior attitude kind of as a spiritual replacement for the comfort that they got from religion. Does that make sense? Like they receive a certain amount of fake comfort believing that they are victims of these things. That keeps them stagnant, but also can be very dangerous because they propagate ideas that are dangerous. And I think that a part of the social justice warriorisms, and this is just a theory, like a hypothesis, but I think there's an aspect of the fact that the United States is becoming drastically less religious in a very, very fast way. And the extremes of a religion that we have in the United States, I think one of the reasons why social justice warriorisms is so strong in the United States specifically and so violently vocal is because of this reaction against religion. Because we have such a free market in religion and these ideas, and now all these people are leaving religion and they don't know where to go because all these people were religious instead of kind of slowly adopting non-religious ideas or getting rid of religion, or religion is a non-issue. No, it's from one extreme to the other.
Yeah. I absolutely, I can see exactly where you're coming from on that. It's kind of funny that you my daughter sent me a quote last night. Actually, while I was sleeping, I got up this morning just after I got a message from you, really. And she gave me a quote, and I don't know who said it, but it sounds so familiar. But it says, the most common way that people give up their power is by thinking that they don't have any. right? And I think that's where a lot of the victim kind of mentality kind of comes from. It's just that they believe they don't have any power, so they're trying to seize it back by admitting they don't. You know, like, does that make any sense to you?
Can you say it again?
Like, see if I can say this another way here. People give away their power in hopes that, like, okay, people taking the victim narrative, you know, for instance, like, you know, like we look at Melody Hensley from, you know, like quitting Twitter because it triggers her and she's getting PTSD from Twitter, and playing the whole like I'm a victim because she feels that it gives her a certain amount of power by giving away her power. Like, does that sound pathological to you at all? Like,
I don't understand how someone consciously or unconsciously feels as if they are getting power for giving away their power.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure what you mean.
Okay, maybe I'm just...
Like, there is a power in being a victim in a structure that gives power to victims or tries to, like, resolve an issue of victimhood by trying to give more power from in one area, balance the scales, I should say.
Yeah.
Like, I can understand that, but I don't think that's exactly what you're saying.
No, you know what? The reality is I'm still not 100% sure what I'm saying right now, actually.
That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's completely granted. So,
yeah.
Yeah. So I feel like when it comes to like victimization, I think there's a comfortable. My mom is a very, very intelligent person. I love her to death, and she's also very logical. And she always talked me through emotional issues and emotional things because she was very wise in understanding what's going on when it comes to like people's feelings. And it just blows me that people don't realize how good it feels to be a victim. That these people who are claiming victim status almost feel a kind of comfortable, I'm sitting in the mud. I don't want to get up and take a shower. I don't want to get up and take a bath because I'm comfortable here in the mud. You know what I mean? Like, I know I'm dirty. I know I'm going to get a nasty rash, but like I'm sitting here in the mud and I don't want to do the work that it takes to get up and take a shower and feel better.
Yeah.
Because it feels better at the moment to sit in the mud. So.
No, I can understand that that sort of thing. Like, for in my experience, what it was is like my parents are deaf, right? So and my mom was a little kind of borderline mentally disabled, right? She was still able to hold a conversation, but like there wasn't a whole lot of wisdom coming from my mom, right? It was more along the lines of like, this is how you cook, this is how you clean. That's essentially that, right? And I love my mom to bits, but like because I never had that, I had to seek out my wisdom in other places, and that was kind of what threw me towards religion, because that was never a family-oriented thing. That was my own choice.
Mine too.
Yeah. So, and then I had a stepfather who could hear, but he was one of those kind of like, he was working, and then he was working on his car, and then he was working on this, and then he was working on that. And the only thing that he and I ever had was our mutual interest in computers and video games, essentially. Right? We both loved, like,
and that doesn't lend yourself to talking about emotional issues. So.
No. So basically, a lot of that, a lot of like coming to terms with my own emotionality and like my own psyche essentially was completely solo. Like, I had to work on that myself, and I had to think about things myself, and I did a lot of reading and I did a lot of studying, and like I don't have any post-secondary education, right? I never went to college. I went to a trade school to learn a few things here and there, right? But I never actually took any post-secondary, even though psychology has always fascinated me. You know, I read, like, I have a stack of Psychology Today magazines sitting over here in the corner, right? And I thumb through them. They're an interest. You know, sociology, it's an interest. Science, the technology, engineering, mathematics, they're all like just interest. And I was always kind of like a jack of all trades, master of none. In that regard, right? But because of that, like I had to kind of like form my own philosophical views. And it's really interesting looking back over my life, that the evolution that it took, right? Because first it was very influenced by religion, right? And then as soon as the religion aspect left, then it was very influenced by like conspiracy theories and, you know, things like that. And then, you know, and then that dipped, and it's almost like a wave form, you know, like it just kind of went up and down throughout the course of my life, where it was just like, okay, you know, like I'd absorb something and it would be up the top, it would peak, and then I would let it kind of like fester and you know, like that kind of thing, and then I'd be onto something else. And the one thing that I did learn is that I will never know everything, you know, but that doesn't mean I shouldn't stop trying, you know. So in terms of
do you feel lost about not knowing everything? Like, do you feel like
no,
at those peaks you were hoping that you could know enough about the subject to be more of a to know enough about the subject to be satisfied?
I feel
and then the low parts, you were disappointed in that, or was it just more of like?
I actually feel, well, I think it's just a process all around. I actually feel more comforted knowing that I'll never actually know everything. That's a comfort to me, because I can look around and I can realize that every single person out there on the planet is the same in that regard. Nobody will ever know everything.
Yeah.
You know, you can be really well versed in a topic. You can be, you know, like, you can be really well educated and spend your entire life researching something, and you will still only ever barely scratch the surface of what's really there, right? So that I found that really comforting, in that, like, hey, you know, like, because I've been wrong about so much in my life, right? And knowing that, like, well, so is everybody else, you know, to varying degrees, obviously, but that was always very comforting to me, you know. And
yeah, and it's a way to not excuse yourself from the consequences of your actions, but more of having self-compassion, you know, being compassionate towards yourself about like the things that you may have done that you regret.
Being fair to myself.
Yeah, that's a better way.
Being fair to myself, yeah.
I think the biggest thing that people in general, especially people who suffer from self-pity and depression, like taking a step back and looking at yourself as if you were another person is a really helpful exercise. Like, imagining another person telling you the things that you're saying to yourself about yourself. You know what I mean? Because I've had friends who've come to me and said, "Oh, I'm a sucky person. I did this and I felt like this." Especially like coming out of like a cult, a lot of people reach out to me and I've helped people leave. And like the biggest thing is that people always beat themselves up about the way that they left. And the biggest thing that I have to tell people is, number one, it doesn't matter how you leave. They're going to blame you for all of your actions. No matter what you do to try to do things the right way, there's no way to leave this church without it having being your fault, without having you done something wrong. So you have to accept that. And second, you're going to fuck up. You're going to do things the wrong way. Like, because you've never done this before. You've never left a cult before. And hopefully you'll never have to leave one again. So do the best that you can do. Look back, learn from your mistakes, and then just take a breath.
Yeah.
And accept the fact that that everyone makes irreparable mistakes in life.
Yep. Yeah. And that's, you know, and that's exactly it. Like, it made me realize that, you know, my flaws were my strengths in certain ways. You know, my basic human limitations. Everybody has these basic human limitations. It doesn't matter how many structures we set up, what kind of government's in place, what kind of systems we have that make the world run. It can always improve. There is no perfect way to live. There is no, you know, it's all over the place, essentially. And I think that like, in terms of like, one of the first things that I learned to accept that was a huge eye opener for me is that you won't always get closure. Right. And I see this all the time. People are like, oh, well, you know, this would be different if I just got closure. Well, you're never going to get that closure. I'm sorry. You know,
and you wouldn't know if it would actually be different.
Exactly. Right. And now I've had situations where I've gotten closure, and I've had situations where I haven't gotten closure. And ultimately afterwards, I still felt exactly the same. There was no difference. Right. So I learned really quickly after that stop looking for closure, you know, just accept that, hey, You know, it may never come. It may come. If it comes, great. You know, but you know, actually, sorry, funny little anecdote. I was bullied mercilessly when I was 12 years old. Yeah. I had this one bully, and he
like physical abuse and stuff.
Physical abuse, the whole 9 yards, and he would not let up on me. Like, I'd be sitting in the hallway, and he'd come up behind me and drop kick me for no goddamn reason, right? One of those types. Teachers never saw it, so he never got in trouble, and I was not the tattletale type, right? But he wouldn't let up. Anyways, I got out of the 7th grade, and we went to different high schools, so I never saw him. And then when I was 21, I was with like 3 of my buddies actually at a nightclub. We were like half cut already, and I look over and I see this guy, and I'm like that's him. Holy shit! So I'm like. And I'm like, oh, okay, I got to go talk to this guy. Like, because at that point in my life, I was already, whatever, it's in the fucking past. I don't even care anymore, right? But I went over and I sat, and it was kind of funny because I sat next to him. I'm like, hey, Wes, right? And he's just like, yeah. He didn't recognize me at all, right? Mind you, I looked way different at the time too.
Yeah.
I was
probably hair. So
what's that?
Hair, probably.
Yeah. Or lack thereof. Actually, I was shaving my head at that point. But I sat with him like, well, do you remember me? You know, and I told him my name, and then his eyes were like he remembered it right away.
Like, oh shit, I was a crap kid.
Yeah, well, it was actually really funny, right? Because like I had I was about, oh god, I must have been at least a foot taller than him, right? I probably had 100 pounds on the guy, and I had like my 3 buddies that were like kind of lurking around, and he was there.
Oh, so he was worried.
He was worried, right? He was there with his wife. No, I didn't mean any. Like, I had no intention to like.
But you probably didn't think about that, and as soon as you saw his eyes widen, you're like, no, nothing's gonna happen.
Yeah, like no, it's all good, man. It's all good. But I just wanted to say, like, you know, like, and it was funny too because I was talking to his wife. And I told his wife the story. I'm like, yeah, you know, your husband here, he used to beat the shit out of me every day, and he was like the hell of my grade 7 existence. And she looks at me, and she looks at him, and she's like, pick on him now, Wes. Like,
snap!
And right there, that was the best closure I've ever gotten on anything in my life, because his wife is mocking him now, right? and he's just like down like this, and I'm like, you know what? It's freaking 10 years ago now. It's under the bridge. Yeah. I just wanted to come over and say, whatever, no hard feelings, man. And he's just like, you know what? I actually really appreciate that, because I was worried when you told me who you were. And like, because my buddies weren't small guys either. I mean, these guys, like, they spend two hours a day in the gym kind of thing, right? So I mean. So it was definitely, there might have been an era that like an aura of intimidation going on there that I was not, kind of aware of. But you know what? That was the best closure I ever got. But that's pretty much the best anyone's ever going to get, essentially, in terms of closure. Yeah. One of my coworkers, her son was murdered a few years ago, and they caught the guy. And it turned out that it was just a completely random attack. He was high on drugs. He didn't know who he was stabbing. Essentially, he just came up and just started stabbing this 15-year-old kid. He got killed at a bus stop here in my city, right? And this is one of my coworkers. Well, they caught him, and and the entire time she's hoping for closure. She's hoping for like the justice. Well, he did go to jail for 10 years, right? And so at that, she was like, "This is the closure I want." Right, but then the guy is a psycho, right? He turned around and he said to her, "I'll see you in 10 years," and that undid every sense of closure that she had. Right, it increased her anxiety. Like, she's got like she's such a wonderful woman too, right? And it actually breaks my heart to see how much anxiety she has now over all of this. Right, it's very difficult for her to function at work. It's very difficult for a lot of stuff, and a lot of us are kind of like making room for her, trying to help her, because we understand.
She gotta get a gun.
That what's that?
She got to get a gun.
Canada.
Oh.
You can't do handguns in Canada. Well, you can, but
not even like defensive, like one-shot handguns.
I'm not 100% sure. I'm not 100% sure. We're more of a, like, the guns that I like for the firearms acquisition certificate that I was looking at getting. it would only allow for like hunting rifles and things like that, right? Because
Better
like
than nothing, but
it's
like
better
you
than
can't carry it
nothing.
around. Like literally here in the United States, like I was talking to this lady on the metro about like you know, the fact that she worked a night shift and she had to come in on the metro like late or leave in the morning early and stuff like that. And so she was just like, "Yeah, I always have my gun in my purse." And she was just all like, and I was just like, "She has a gun in her purse." Because in my head, I'm just like, "Oh my God, there's a gun in her purse." Like open carry. I was at Panera the other day, and this like white skinhead Nazi looking guy came in with a gun belt, like just sitting there, and he came in, he sat there, and he was like looking at everybody like the scariest fucking thing you've ever seen.
That would
Like
cause a
everybody,
panic.
everybody just like when you walk in. But
Yeah.
like, you know, in certain areas it would be more common, so less people would feel like that. But you know, I
Yeah.
know that if I'd been any person other than a white girl in that situation in that Panera, I'd be a lot more nervous.
Yeah.
Because this
for
guy
sure.
looked like one of those guys that would just be all like,
Yeah. Yeah. I just noticed that we actually have viewers now.
"Oh, we do? How
Yeah.
many?"
Two.
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 Hi guys. Oh
Hi,
no, one of
guys.
them is me. One of them is me.
Oh, one of them's you? Okay. Well, one of them isn't me. So we got one.
Yeah.
We got one then.
Oh,
Is there anything going on in the chat? I actually didn't even bother loading it up.
evildoer saying hi. That's all.
Evildoer
Oh,
saying
yeah.
hi. Okay. Hi, evildoer. Awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. So but like that kind of scenario out here. Now we do have our share of you know, wizards, grand wizards, and fucking white supremacists and stuff like that out here.
Wizards.
KKK.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the KKK. They I don't know how they organize their.
But even
hierarchy,
here,
but
like the
there's, a grand wizard.
KKK, they're like a non-thing.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of like one of those groups that you're just always gonna have extreme groups that say crazy stuff. You know what I mean? Like there's no like getting around the fact that there's gonna be some. We have black supremacist groups who literally go out in the streets and like point at people saying like you white. Like literally, if you're Asian or white, they'll just like harass you in the streets.
I've
I mean,
seen
that
those
doesn't
guys.
happen very often, but yeah.
The Hebrew Israelite movement, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember I was at my community
Those guys
college
are
once.
freaky.
I know. I was at my that, and then there's the Black Islam group. And I had an interaction with them one time because the group that I hung out at when I was at my community college was like mostly like African and black, like Black American, but mostly African. And so like the Christian group that I would hang out with, the different kinds of Christian groups that was involved with my Christian group on my community college. And so one day there was this huge gathering of all these like black men in the hall. It was just like all like surrounding this one guy who was just talking really loud, and I walk up to it and I'm just like I want to hear what's going on. And one of my friends comes over and he just pats me on the back and he's just like, "Kayla, just you can stand here, that's fine, I'll stand with you, but like just don't worry about what he's saying, okay?" Like just saying some really racist shit. But it was really cool to have that kind of support though, because otherwise I would have been too intimidated. Like after hearing what exactly he was saying, I probably would have left at that point.
Oh yeah.
Worried about
I found this.
had
one...
he not come up and just put his arm on my shoulder and said, "Kayla, it's okay. Like nothing's gonna happen." So
I found this one video of it's the video is called "The Most Hateful Group in America," right?
yeah.
And it starts off and it's just a group of like Hebrew Israelites, the Black Hebrew Israelite movement or whatever the hell they're called. And right out of the bat, they're pointing at white people saying that you're going to be a slave. You're going to be a slave. We're going to rape your daughters. We're going to rape your sisters. We're going to own you and fucking and it's coming, whitey. Like, and they always say so-called white people, so-called black people, and it's just like, yeah, like it would intimidate the hell out of me. I would have been like I can hold my own in a fight, but my God, I would have been like, get me the hell out of here. This is scary, you know. Actually,
and you get both kinds of groups
there
on campus. The only people that I haven't seen that are like supremacists, like don't have like supremacist groups, I've never heard of a like Latino supremacist group, and a lot of that I think has to do with the fact that there's so many different countries, and so there's not one Latino culture in the United States, and also like no Asian supremacist groups. But I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that a lot of Asians come in and they do come in and college educated, and they go into
Yeah,
they're
they tend
less.
to be pretty well educated.
There's a lot more poor like white people and black people, and then there's the issue of like Latinos not necessarily having a common culture in that way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I actually,
like the closest thing is like Mexican liberation groups and things like that, like Mexican American liberation groups.
Yeah, I came across a video it's a couple months ago now, but there's this British guy that's living, or maybe he's an American guy, but he's living in Taiwan, right? And he was a YouTuber, so he's always making videos about, like, you know, he'd sit there and he would talk in Taiwanese, and you know, his girlfriend was Taiwanese, and you know, he was an expatriate. He lived there now, right? And then this one video he did went absolutely viral, where he's on a train, and this Taiwanese guy comes up to him and just starts calling him a trash foreigner for no reason, right? Calling his girlfriend a whore and a slut and this kind of thing. You know, she would sleep with foreigners, she would sleep with a dog, you know, like that kind of thing. Right? And he's recording the entire time saying, like, sir, please, like, we're just sitting here, like, there's no reason for this. And he kept like threatening him and like this whole 9 yards. But it was really interesting because when the video went viral, like, he initially went to the police, and the police wouldn't do anything about it, right? But then the video went viral, right? And it got the Taiwanese government got involved, and like all the news organizations got involved. They found the guy. They ended up arresting him or questioning him, bringing him to the police station. But he got like just cornered by the news, or the news media in Taiwan. Were like, aren't you ashamed of embarrassing Taiwan like that? You know, like various things like that. And I think that's where it comes down to is that kind of stuff.
It's human nature.
It's human nature, you know, where, you know, you're going to have that tribalism, that sense of, you know, like, my tribe's better than your tribe. But when, like, I grew up looking at that sort of tribalism and being like, that is embarrassing. That's embarrassing to my culture. You know, like, I lived in a small town for a little while, 8,000 people. And it did have its share of like the white supremacist types. Like, there was a guy who, like, he went around and he dressed up like an SS Waffen kind of guy all the time, right? He wore the boots. He had a long coat, but he didn't have any like logos or insignias or anything like that. But he definitely dressed the part. And he would and honestly, I had no idea. I thought he was just a little bit pretentious and trying to look all sophisticated, right? I had no idea until I actually started talking to the guy. The guy seemed totally normal until he's all of a sudden he's just like clicking his heels together. He opens
his mouth.
And then like, whoa, what, right? And it's kind of funny because his ex-girlfriend was Jewish. And that's what made me like, wait, what? Right? It's just like, that's we're allowed to sleep with the Jews. We're just not allowed to marry them. Anyways, so
that's
you know,
kind of crazy.
Yeah. So whenever I see that kind of thing, like, very much to me, it does seem like embarrassing, right? Especially for bringing people like I would have friends visit me in this town, and then they'd see this and they'd be like, "Whoa, what the hell? What's going on here?" Right? But yeah.
I don't really, but the thing is, like, I don't associate with those groups, so it's hard for me to be. Like, I'm the only thing I really have in common with groups like that is the fact that I'm white. And it's the same thing, too, with, like, my friends who are black. Like, I would never, not in a million years, associate them with the black, like Hebrew Israelites or, like, black supremacist groups and things like that. Not in a million years. Like, even if they were speaking a little bit like that, like, there are times when out of frustration for things that are going on in the United States right now, and out of the frustration with the conversations that have been popping up around it, they will say things that are like a little bit bigoted towards white people, and I'll have to remind them, like, hey, like,
chill, yeah.
I'm here. Like, dude, like, not all. In fact, not the majority, the same way with, like, you know, anyway.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, so, but I would never in a million years associate any of my friends with that.
No.
Period.
No, and I think that's what bothers me a lot about, like, you know, I don't even like calling the social justice like movement, because like I like the idea of social justice, right? There's nothing inherently wrong with that. It's just the methods that they're using where, I've spent most of my life, like I've gotten myself put in the hospital by taking a stand against racism. Okay. Yeah. I've literally been like punched so hard and beat with freaking boots and like almost curb stomped.
What happened?
In the hospital. I stood up for somebody that I didn't know very well because of the color of their skin. Okay, basically, I was going home from school one day. I was probably about 16, 17 years old. There was a group of 4 white kids, well-known, the Nazi types, right? And they were going off on this East Indian guy who was like a new student. He was like literally one of the like fresh off the boat types, right? Couldn't speak very good English, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I didn't like what I was seeing, so I said something, and I yelled, and I'm like, hey, what the hell? What's your problem, right? And I got up, and and then they started getting right in my face, and I was, tough 16-year-old, right? So I got back in their face, and then I ended up getting like the boots laid to me pretty good there. Yeah. But there's been a couple points in my life where I've taken stands on things. That there's a party I was at when I was about 24. I want to say I was 24. Where these guys were like just ragging on this one black guy that was at this party, right? And they're just ragging on him, get the fuck out of here, you this, you that, like using every racial slur in the book. And I was just like, no, what the hell are you guys doing, right? And I actually had a few friends that were like on board with me on this whole thing. They're like, what are you doing? Leave the guy alone. He's just here to have fun. Like, just like relax. Go and have a drink over in there in your corner. He'll stay in his, whatever, right? And that ended up being a near brawl, and one of my other buddies ended up getting one of his teeth kicked in, right? Now, after all this, all the like in my life, I have taken several stands against racism, and only to discover that the people who
you're racist anyway.
Yeah, only to discover that I'm racist anyway, just because of the virtue of my skin color. I'm very much a Martin Luther King school, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Judge people on the content of their character, not the color of their skin. Absolutely, 100%. I'm 100% on board with that. But now we've got like the University of Oregon Student Union considering like removing that quote from their wall because it's not inclusive enough. To who?
What? Who isn't it? They're really considering that.
They're really considering. A
lot of these things that you're talking about, like these people and social things that have happened, I don't really know much about because I'm just kind of coming into the conversation about all these social justice warrior things. It wasn't something that I was focusing on until recently.
Yeah, you know what? It wasn't something that I ever worried about until I started seeing it. And there's a link there for you.
Okay.
University of Oregon removing MLK quote for not being inclusive enough. And the quote itself is, "I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character." That's the quote. Who is that not including?
Yeah.
That is including everybody. My
hope is that the more that these conversations, I think the problem, the thing is, I think a lot of what happened with the social justice warriors that have caused them to be even more extreme, if they are actually more extreme than they were before, is that they have actually stepped into a more public sphere. Like before, they were confined mostly to college campuses, but now they basically fucked with gamers, for instance, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so because they're getting more public exposure and more people are understanding the way that these people function, there is going to be less and less tolerance for this kind of behavior. As long as we keep speaking up, as long as we don't stay silent, as long as people are willing to say those things, and as long as we temper our speech too.
Yeah.
Like I think that some of these real extreme types, like Rush V, the things that he's been saying, I'm just like, that's not helpful.
Yeah.
Like you might be right or wrong, I don't know, but if you're trying to go towards a more egalitarian society, or if you really feel that there's inequalities against men, then why wouldn't you try to go about it in a more helpful way?
I don't think
sense?
But I think Rush is a really bad example for that, because Rush is only in that for Rush.
Yeah. I don't know anything about him other than that one article. But I know that article, whether or not it was satirical, I don't care. This is not helpful.
Yeah.
This completely, but I mean, maybe it might have been helpful because I had a conversation with a feminist about my issues with feminism. And
Hmm.
at the end of the conversation, she thanked me because she's just all like, this conversation, I didn't think that people disagreed with feminism that could have a decent conversation about this without getting hateful. And
And
I was just all like, oh, because these ideas she'd never considered before, because even if she had heard them, people were shouting them at her, assuming that she understood the negative effects. It's the same thing with Christians who walk into the atheist community. A lot of times it's like walking into a den of tigers. These people who've had to really think through a lot of the hurt that they've had from a religion start acting like wounded dogs, and they attack the first person who reaches out even a kind hand to them. You know what I mean? Instead of assuming that religious people might have really great intentions, or might be really kind people that are misinformed.
hmm.
You know, and I think there's the same thing with a lot of these people who are not the head honchos of the social justice warrior movement. You know, if you're willing to reach out a kinder hand, that is going to inspire more conversations that will do what we want to do, which is create more conversation where in which we can criticize their ideas.
Well, with my own, like I have my own set of rules in which I engage with social justice warriors on, right?
Yeah.
And that is, even if they insult me right out of the gates, I won't insult them back, right? Because I'm more interested in like trying to help them understand what my point of view might be on a matter than to have a feel good, like, haha, I gotcha kind of thing, like, gotcha, like this gotcha tactic bullshit. I despise it. I have since the beginning. I got in a little bit of an argument over one of my previous videos with a social justice warrior who came out, called me a fucking idiot right out of the bat. That was the comment. I'm like, what are you referring to? What's idiotic? And what it was is
Did you ask that question?
What's that?
You asked that question.
I'm not sure if I got that question exactly. It was paraphrased somehow, or I would have to load it up to figure it out. But it was they took what I eventually figured out is they had taken issue with the fact that I believe that even though somebody was the recipient of death and rape threats, they're still subject to criticism, right? And I'm like, yeah, I understand that they received these threats, and and that's horrible, and that should not be a part of the discourse, but they're not correct about this, or in my opinion, they're not correct about this, and that still needs to be addressed. This is still something that needs to be addressed. That doesn't make me one of the people that's sending her or them or whoever death and rape threats. Okay.
So you're trying to make the distinguish between the threats and actual criticism.
Yes.
Just because somebody is receiving a lot of attention and threats doesn't mean that they can't also, rightly so, receive criticism and ridicule. Kind of like one of the reasons why Richard Dawkins took down his tweet was because somebody said that would increase the amount of harassment that Big Red was getting with a caricature of the feminist in that video. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Situation.
Well, just because she was receiving threats does not mean that she isn't still up for ridicule and criticism.
Or mockery,
or mockery.
Yeah.
You're not immune from those things just because you've also received things that are actually wrong.
Yeah, and neither am I.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Like, I've received threats. I actually had to go stealth on my Facebook account because they figured out who I was and they were sending me threats.
Yeah.
Right. And so I completely went undercover, and I changed my name. I even changed my gender. So I mean, yeah, that's right. See, I'm a sock puppet, guys. Just on Facebook, and it's just among my group of friends, anyways. But that's just the point. Is just because I'm even if I was receiving the worst of threats and stuff, it wouldn't change the fact that if I said something that was worthy of criticism, it still deserves criticism. In fact, as a writer and do you write at all, like fiction, anything like that, poetry? Okay, one of the things that you learn to absolutely value as a writer is criticism. Okay, because you
Yeah.
cannot improve without it. And that's ever since I was about 18 and I got that concept with writing, I've had no problem receiving criticism. I welcome it. I want people to come in and offer me constructive, especially constructive criticism. But if they're sitting there just insulting me every second word, well, that's not
Yeah.
criticism, you know?
I want to do a video called The Art of Being Wrong.
Yeah.
I was going to talk about like the epistemology and like how important it is to be wrong about things, because one of the things that I realized with the huge influx of people on my YouTube channel is that a lot of people come in, even if they don't want to, they still come in with an attitude of I'm right and you're wrong. There's not a humility when it comes to their ideas.
Yeah.
And like I have a way of trying to go about showing them that without telling them, because it's just like, okay, mom, when you're just all like you're acting this way. But typically I ask a lot of questions. Like if somebody is being really critical and unhelpful in a conversation stream, I'll just be all like, okay, so well, explain that to me a little bit more. Like what is your goal? Like what do you want to get out of this conversation? Like I was trying to have a conversation with like this Mormon guy, and I was trying to ask the Mormon guy questions, but at the same time someone else was commenting on the stream, just attacking his church for all the horrible things his church has done.
Yeah.
And so I was just like, okay, so like were you a Mormon? Are you concerned with the things that the church has done? Like what are you trying to get out of criticizing his church? And at one point he had said, well, I don't care if this guy changes his mind. And then at the next second, you know, I'd ask him a couple more questions, and it turns out that he is concerned with changing the guy's mind. So we could have a conversation about what is the best method to change someone's mind. Is attacking the church the best way? You know, does that actually change people's mind? Well, no, like, because the issue is their fundamental idea, that they fundamentally believe that faith is a good way to come to knowledge about something, and they're using that to believe in the church. So it wouldn't matter whether you criticize their church or not. So you criticizing their church is all about you feeling good about virtue signaling, about you feeling good about criticizing somebody's organization because their organization is shit, you know, like, or it has done shitty things.
I think
and so I think that I really want to, one of the things that I want to do with my presence on YouTube, if I ever get around to making videos, because I'm a really busy person, is creating videos that talk about the heart issues behind these discussions. Like, it is very important to be intelligent and to have good points, but more so if you want to actually, if your goal is to convince other people, and if your goal is to better that other person's life, there's objectively better ways to go about it. And if you're not trying to go about it those ways, you have to ask yourself the question, why am I having this conversation? Is it about me? Or is it really about this other person that I want to benefit their life?
For sure.
Period.
Yeah.
And so that's one thing I want to talk about when it comes to the art of being wrong.
That's why you made that video kind of like, this is me coming back to YouTube kind of thing after
a little bit,
Steve Shives thing. And there's that one statement that really jived with me, because I even put it in that video, the 4 YouTubers you should check out, right? Was that you want to focus on what is good and right instead of who is good and right. And that was really important. And that spoke volumes to me, because there's so many people here who are like, oh, well, I take Sargon's point of view. Like, well, there's some stuff, I love Sargon, don't get me wrong, but there's some stuff that I kind of disagree with him on.
I don't care about Sargon's point of view when I'm talking to somebody. I'm just like, okay, what about Sargon's view? Because if you can't explain it to me, I consider myself ignorant of an idea until I can thoroughly explain it in my own words. Until I can defend it.
Yeah.
Because if I can't defend it, that means I don't know it. I don't know it well enough. And that's the thing. That's one thing I learned in a lot of martial arts, is that you don't know something until you can teach it. You do not know what you're talking about until you can appropriately teach it on the level of your understanding. And that's also where you can benefit yourself and create, criticize and where you can find holes in your own arguments, which is the ultimate goal of getting better in your understanding of things.
For sure.
Like, if you're not seeking after the holes in your argument, then what are you doing? You're just bolstering your own views. You know
Actually,
what I mean?
I really like that point of view too, because that was a huge eye opener for me way back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
Was I need to instead of going around trying to prove myself right, I need to start going around trying to prove myself wrong, because that creates a much stronger position
Mm-hmm.
than the opposite, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah. It's the
yeah,
same thing. All ideas, and the best way to approach anything is the scientific method, right?
hmm
And you can use a scientific method on your own ideas. It's not going to be the same because you're not in a laboratory, but the basic idea of this: assume you're wrong until you're right, until assume that your ideas can be proven wrong at any time.
yeah,
If you have that basic assumption, you're not only humble, but you're also more likely to be right. You're more likely to be right on the ideas that you haven't been able to prove wrong yet. And that's why I speak a lot, especially when I was speaking to Shives, of having the amount of trust that you have in something, or the amount of faith or belief that you have in an idea, be proportional to the amount of evidence that you have. That's not just positive evidence, it's also negative evidence. How much negative evidence and criticism have you been able to fill in? Like, you know what I mean? Like, how many of the holes do you see in your argument? Because if you can't see any holes in your argument, then you're definitely in a bad place.
yeah, for
Because
sure.
you'll always have holes in your arguments, and if you don't know where your holes are, it's kind of like when you're fighting, like Muay Thai, for instance. Like when you're in a fight, or when you're preparing for a fight or something, everything is about finding where your holes are and then fixing those holes and filling them in and doing better in those weak areas. Because your fight is as good as your weakest move. And it's the same thing with an argument. Your fight is as good as your weakest argument. I mean, your argument, your idea, and the solidity of your idea is as good as your weakest idea.
And
In that model that you have.
it can also be related to writing.
In
Same
writing
thing.
too.
In writing,
Yeah.
there are a lot of areas where it can actually be fit into, right? And I
Yeah.
think especially in terms of like debate and like knowing your facts and whatnot, right? Like I've got a bookshelf full of books back here. I got another one over here, and I've got like pretty much the entire Dawkins collection. A lot of psychology books and things like that. But I always read these things because I want to know, like, well, are my assumptions on certain areas of psychology correct? Are my assumptions correct? And there's a lot of the things that like are literally, and I'll freely admit, they're like literally plucked out of the ether, essentially, ideas that I have gone out and they're like, I wonder if there's any truth to this. And I haven't been able to disprove anything, but I still can't accept that like it's 100% true, right?
Yeah. Well, you know where it could be disproven, and that's the difference. Like,
Yeah.
if you're walking into, like, I consider certain of my ideas as hypotheses, right? And a part of my process of trying to figure out whether or not it's a good theory, good enough for me to accept as a theory, I start testing those hypotheses. I start arguing. I start debating. And then people give me data or give me their arguments. And so I take a step back and I say, okay, I'm going to read this. I'm going to process through this. And then I revise my belief based on that. And at a certain point, I stop in my head calling them hypotheses. I call them theories because they're well enough established, not even just in my own mind, but also, I find other people corroborate my idea, that I could call it a theory. But it's all proportional to the amount of evidence and the amount of criticism that I've been able to gain from that. So
yeah, and I think more people need to understand the distinction between a theory and a hypothesis, because I see it misused so often. Like, they'll say, hey, I have a theory. Actually, you have a hypothesis. You have an idea.
yeah,
that kind of
most
thing.
of the time hypotheses are, like, when it comes to like normal conversation and intellectual conversations, like lay intellectual conversations, a hypothesis looks a lot like an anecdotal argument. If you're hypothesizing an extrapolation off of your anecdotal argument, for instance, I could say, and this is what people didn't understand in my talk with Steve. Like, one of the biggest criticisms I got is everything I said was anecdotal. Well, yes, because I didn't have a lot of evidence, and what I was saying was, if this anecdote could apply to more than just my life, then this would be the truth, right?
Yeah.
So I wasn't saying, I was applying my anecdotal experiences to a wider theory or wider model, but I was only doing that on the condition that my anecdote is a correct interpretation of generally what things are what are happening.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? As a thought experiment. I wasn't saying that my anecdote means that this is going on in the world. I was using my anecdote to show him why I it was easier for me to understand the model that I had in my own head, my actual theory, which
Yeah.
is, it's, to me it seems more likely that there's huge biological factors in the way that men and women behave, which may, you know, account for a lot of the choices that women make, that if we tried to change those things, especially change them too quickly, it may be a detriment. You know what I mean? And so a lot of people didn't understand a lot of the probable words that I would use, like may and seem. You know, it's fascinating to watch how people work, because people are so extreme that they expect, especially the more extreme that you are, the more extreme you expect other people's ideas to be. So it's really interesting. You have to talk people down constantly on the internet, because you have to show them that you're not extreme to the extreme. You know?
I think the biggest two problems that I see, especially like because I'm really active on Twitter, right? And the biggest two problems I see is trait ascription bias, where they start just ascribing traits to you before they've even had a chance to really know what you're about.
Yeah.
Right. Like, oh, you disagree with me on, you know, this topic. That means that you automatically disagree with me on this topic. And that's not always the case. Right. And the other is hostile attribution bias. You know, I'll come into a conversation and I'll say, hey, you know, like, well, what's the deal here? And they'll automatically assume that my intentions are hostile, that I'm there to insult them, that I'm there to do this. And I've noticed this a lot. And I've noticed that I've been guilty of it from time to time as well. But now that I'm more conscious of it, I try not to I try to approach things a little bit differently, if that makes any sense. Right.
Yeah.
And those are the two biggest issues that I come across. Anyways, you have to leave in like 3 minutes, don't you?
I could say a little bit longer.
Okay.
It's my friend is texting me, and like I don't know exactly where we're gonna meet up.
Okay.
So let me talk a little bit more. Say hi to everybody, and then I'll text him.
Yeah, I'm actually in the chat now, because like I was like, oh, I should probably do that. So there you go.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I do a lot because I'm like I said, like I really want to have the attitude of I want to know what is right as opposed to who is right. And a big part of that is trying to correct my own behavior. Like certain things, like I can get really passionate about things. I can get very one-sided in the way that I think about things.
I think we're all guilty
and very
of that.
heated. Everybody can, especially when you're being corrected in what you're thinking. A lot of times what I'll say is, okay, well, I don't have time to think about this right now, but I'm going to come back to you on that. Right? And then a couple days later, when I've thought about it and I'm not so emotionally involved in the discussion, I continue the discussion. Sometimes people don't want to continue the discussion because they're over it. But a lot of times people respond really well to that, because not only do they know that you've actually processed through their ideas, because it's always more important to understand the other person than to be understood. Always. It's always more important, in my book, you know, to understand the other person's argument than it is to be understood.
Yeah.
Like, because nobody cares what you know until they know how much you care, pretty much. So, but yeah, so those are kind of things that I do to correct my own behaviors when it comes to those things. And it's not perfect, obviously, and I don't beat myself up about it. Like when I've said stupid stuff on the internet, like there was this one point where under one of Sargon's videos, I was just all like, yeah, I think the thinking ape, not the thinking ape. Yeah, it's Stardust. He's like a red pillar, but he's like really chill.
Okay.
And like not evil.
I know for a fact that I've seen I've seen comments and stuff. I don't think I've seen any of their videos though.
Sargon basically called him out in a video for something, and then underneath I was just like, yeah, I agree that he's ideological. And so like then I never expected anybody to see my post, and so both Sargon and Stardust like started talking about like how like started talking on my comment, right? And so like Stardust was like, how am I ideological? How am I an ideologue? How like that kind of thing. And I was just like really like freaked out because I didn't really think very thoroughly about what I was saying. I just saw some of the things that he said and reacted to it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean, since then I've thought about it more and thought, oh, well, yeah, definitely I agree that in these specific areas he's an ideologue. But, you know, at the time, you know, because everybody does that, right?
It's
but
hard
as long
to
as you're
avoid.
willing to be humble and do corrective behaviors and forgive yourself for saying stupid shit online, you know,
Yeah,
or laugh at yourself when you're when you're stupid. So.
Exactly. That's actually the main thing too, is being able to laugh at yourself, especially in a situation that like too many people are taking seriously, right?
Yeah.
You got to be able to just like inject some humor, and I think humor is an extremely powerful tool in the overall discourse of a lot of what's going on, whether it be atheism or social justice or anything like that. I think it is ultimately power, and I think that's how. And I think that's how gamers reacted so well, is because they reacted with a lot of humor.
Yeah.
They reacted with a lot of humor. They're just like mocking. They're like making jokes. They're like, you're ridiculous. So I'm just going to mock you and make fun of you. Because
and the funnest thing about that is because social justice warriors don't understand humor.
Yeah.
Someone sent me a video the other day, one of my friends, and it was basically this woman. It was a couple years ago, was complaining about someone made a rape joke on a radio show.
Okay.
And so the guy was getting fired. And so there was this like black comedian and this lady who was agreeing with the fact that they should be hired, huh?
It was Patrice O'Neill. I know. I know the exact thing you're talking about.
And so he got everybody literally like, she was sitting there trying to say that rape is bad or rape jokes are always bad. And then he, the entire time, was making people crack up about rape. Yeah. Like, and her, including her. Yeah. You know, it's just like these social justice warriors don't get humor. And the point that he made was just so on point.
Yeah, yeah. Like, I actually remember that. It was probably a couple of weeks ago that I actually watched that video, right? Yeah. Because he was doing that. It was the angry pirate joke he was telling. It's a donkey punch. It's funny. You know? It's like, oh god. And it's funny too because like one of my ex-girlfriends, like that I'm actually still friends with, is she has a shirt that says donkey punch on it. She walks around wearing the thing all the bloody time. She thinks it's the funniest thing in the world.
It's hilarious.
Right? So it's just like, because like who does that? Like that's something that you see in like the extreme weird porn. You know? Yeah. But yeah, no. And that's just it. And the thing is I think that humor, it can absolutely test our limits on like what is, you know,
it's supposed to
able to, but that's just the point. It's supposed to. You're supposed to, you know, make jokes about child molesters and stuff like that, and especially and I think it's an especially useful tool for people who've actually been through these forms of like abuse and things like that. A friend of mine was actually sexually assaulted at a party a few years ago. And how she copes with it, how she chose to cope with it, is not to just put the blinders on and try to, you know, avoid everything that could make her possibly feel uncomfortable. But she went out of her way to actually like make jokes about it, like not her specifically, but just the situations like that in general. Is find the humor in it, find that kind of thing. And she's one of the most well put together people I've ever met in my life. Yeah. You know. So I mean that, and to me that's very telling, as opposed to the people who are like, yes, okay, something absolutely horrible happened to you, and I'm very.
It's really funny, because a lot of these social justice warriors want to tell you how they want to be treated, right? But they never look at the most healthy people and the way that the most healthy people ask to be treated. Yeah. You know, they never look at, okay, like there's evidence in this person's life of something healthy happening because they're healthy people, right? What is it that they have that I don't have? Instead, they say, there's nothing that anybody has that I don't have. There's nothing wrong with me. There's nothing I need to change. There's nothing I need to correct or fix because I'm just good the way that I am. Everybody pitying me because it's everybody else's fault. And I know that's an extreme, but the people that I know are doing this. Like, there's people that I know that are literally doing this. Yep. So.
I know an extreme fat acceptance person. Right.
Lovely.
which is like, I don't, you know what, if you're happy being overweight, like I'm an overweight guy, I'm not happy with it, right? But
Yeah.
I'm working on trying to, you know, do something about it, right?
Yeah.
If you're happy with being overweight, I don't care. That's it's your business, not mine. It's not going to
It's
make
not
me,
your
you know,
responsibility to tell someone that they should not be happy about being overweight.
Exactly.
But it's also not your responsibility for me to sit to try to shame me into liking the fact that you're overweight or
fetishizing it or whatever, you know, yeah.
Or trying to say that you're healthy or something like that. I'm just like,
that's
no,
just the thing. It's gone.
You're not healthy.
It's gone.
If you're extremely overweight.
Yeah, it's gone to the point of health denialism, and that's where it kicks me. You know, I'm like, I don't care if you want to be fat, be fat and happy, do your thing, right? Fucking, but like when you sit there and say, oh, well, you know, there's nothing unhealthy about obesity. I'm like, there's a reason why diabetes is called is considered affluenza, you know, and affluenza, diseases of the affluent.
Oh.
Right. And it's because it comes with, you know, obesity. That's one of the telltale factors of diabetes, right? Is like, oh, is this person obese? Now, not in every case, mind you, but still, right? Yeah. It is common. It is very common, and we know that's, you know, that can lead to, you know, A can lead to B, can lead to C, you know, and it's you know, so it's very worrisome for me when I see people going around saying, oh, you know, the doctors don't know shit. And it's a conspiracy theory to keep the fat, you know, keep fat people down. One of my most popular and earliest videos that I ever actually made was on the fat acceptance movement, right?
Yeah.
And you know, and I sat there and I you know, and I tried my best to like just to tear down, especially the health denialism aspect of it. And then I went through like a list of it. I think there was like 8 to 12 things that people within the fat acceptance movement were like parroting, that were like that kind of thing. And to make themselves out to be an oppressed class. It's just like, well, you know, technically fat people are an oppressed class. It's just that they're oppressing themselves. You know, in my opinion, anyways, right?
Well, I mean, there's some people definitely are always going to struggle with their weight. You know what I mean? But there are healthy ways. There's a healthy body weight to everybody, right? And it's obvious when you're not at a healthy body weight. You know what I mean? Like I know women in my life. I'm not gonna like be specific about it, who have the polycystic ovarian syndrome. I don't know if you know what that is.
Polycystic, numerous cysts in her ovaries.
Yeah. So basically, what it does is it messes with your hormones, and so you just gain a lot of weight. Like it is an aspect of that thing where you kind of get thin hair and you gain a lot of weight. But I know women who have it who are extremely overweight, and I know women who have it who just have a belly. Like because they tend to gain weight around the belly area, and it's just you're impossible to lose weight in that area. Yeah. The people who obviously take care of themselves and don't use the disease as an excuse look healthy. Like I would never call them fat. They are a little bit overweight, and especially around their belly area, but it's not something that I would consider disgusting or criticize them about ever. It's just kind of just like, that's your body. You know what I mean? Just like somebody has a nose. You know, because it's obviously they're healthy people. You can see the glow in their face. You can see that they do exercise and eat healthy. And the thing is, like, when somebody is overweight, it's typically has to do with other factors than just their body. And I feel like a lot of people that I know who take that victim mentality about their weight have depression and anxiety and a lot of these things that they're in lack of discipline issues. Yeah. As a part of that too. It's not all discipline, you know, and there's things that are keeping them from being able to develop their discipline. Like a lot of people with anxiety tend to be the kind of people who look at who have their goals up here as opposed to down here, and so they beat up on yourself when they get here, you know. So I can understand, and discipline is built up by stairs, you know. You can't be disciplined here if you're here. And so I understand how accepting who you are can help you build up that discipline and decrease your anxiety and your depression about the way that you look. But I feel like that's a means to the end. Like if you have a realistic outlook on it, you realistically say, I am overweight now. and I'm not going to be not overweight within the year because I don't have enough discipline time, and I have to learn my emotional issues in order to get out of this slump I'm in. And then you have a realistic issue. But it's so much easier to sit in the mud pile in your own shit and say, hey, like I'm a victim because I just cannot do this. No, you just don't have a realistic outlook on it, and you haven't taken decent small steps towards that. You haven't gotten up on the first step. You tried to jump up on the fifth step, and then you fell into the steps and cracked your head open. That's what happened.
That was actually, that was a really hard lesson actually for me to learn, was the whole how to incrementalize goals, right?
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure that it was when I wrote my first book, because I knew I wanted to write a book. And I'd started and I'd stopped and I'd started and I'd stopped and I'd started and stopped. So many different stories, so many different times. But then when I finally took it seriously, instead of writing the book, I was just like, I'm going to write a chapter every 3 days. Right? I'm going to write a chapter every 3 days. And I kept to that, actually. And over the course of 3 months, I wrote a 250,000 page novel. Or, sorry, not page. Word.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah, I was about to say. Is this like a series of novels? Anyway.
Yeah, no, but like within 3 months, and then over the next 6 months, I revised it and I edited it and I made sure that it was good for consumption, and then I self-published it, right? But that was like the number one thing that was on my bucket list that I wanted to make sure that I do before I died. Now I've done it. Now I cross that off. I don't have to worry about that anymore, unless I'm so inclined to write another book, right?
And that makes you feel so satisfied. And I think that's a lot too. Like a lot of these social justice warrior, like not just social justice, anybody who struggles with self-pity. I feel so bad for them because they never get the experience of fighting through something and coming out. That's how you feel good about yourself.
Yeah,
by
absolutely.
having a product where you say, this is what I've made, and this is valuable in and of itself, even if it disappears into the ether. I've done this. You have something to point to. That's a huge aspect of self-confidence that people that I was taught, that my parents like never told me, Kayla, you're just so valuable in and of itself. No, they said, well, just take a realistic outlook on things. Love the things about yourself that you can do and you can accomplish, and then understand and respect the things that you cannot accomplish. My parents were both recovering alcoholics, and so they did a lot of like the program AA and things like that. And so there was a lot of like little, truisms, things that they would say, and one of them is the Lord's Prayer. Help me to accept the things that I cannot change.
Grant me the serenity to accept
the serenity
change, and the wisdom to
know the difference.
Yeah, I had a friend who was AA, so yeah. And so that's kind of the attitude I've always wanted to take with my life. But I feel so bad when I see other people not take up that attitude, because I'm just like, not only would that help you immediately, but that would also help you in the long run. And the problem is that everything in life, including attitudes and behaviors and feelings, need to be changed slowly. Nobody who suffers from self-pity, like extreme forms of self-pity, can get out of that self-pity like immediately. It's something that's also incremental. You just take it one day at a time. That's another AA quote. And you say, today, these are my goals. This is my goals. It's okay if I only make it here. And if I make it only here, the next time I will assess my goals and make them lower, as long as they're there, as long as I have a goal. I think, how old are you, by the way?
I'm 25.
25. Okay, so I got about 10 years on you. So when I started going back to school back in the 80s, 1985 to 1998 was my area in which I did all that. It was still very, and this is Canadian school system, mind you. It was still very much like it taught you that like, yes, you could do whatever you wanted, but you had to work hard for it, right? And one of the things that I've noticed, and I'm not familiar with the American school system, unfortunately, so I can't I don't want to imply anything to the American school system, but I do know that in the Canadian school system now, they don't really teach that. They say, yeah, you can do whatever you want, and then they don't qualify that with anything. They just teach kids growing up, yeah, you can do anything you want. You can do anything you want. But they don't say, but you have to work hard towards it. It's just, there's no qualifier, right? It's just straight up like, it's like participation trophies. Like, it's just like when I was a kid, I won one trophy in school, and I won another one for my bowling team when I was like 12, right? Mm-hmm. But I earned those trophies. I got first place in the track when I was I was like 7 or something like that. I got first place and I got a trophy, and I was so proud of it because I worked so hard. And I was training. I was doing the whole 9 yards as a 7-year-old. And 7-year-olds don't want to train for shit. You know what I mean? Yeah. And then when I was 12, me and the rest of my team, we got first place at a provincial bowling tournament, right? And that was great because the whole team worked together for that one. You know, we were meeting up on our off days and just like practicing bowling. You know, and it's a shitty sport, but like, come on, you know. But these days, simply like you can be on a baseball team and never get off the bench and still walk away with the trophy. What feeling does that give? Like, that's just like, oh, you're just going to get it no matter if you try or not. Yeah. It doesn't, to me, like I understand that it's going to alienate some people, but at the same time, like you're alienating more people by just giving trophies to everybody. Mm-hmm. You know,
it's got an Amber Alert.
An Amber Alert.
Yeah, I don't know, something about a Ford Explorer.
Ford Explorer.
Yeah.
In what city are you in?
What?
Are you in a big city?
I'm near DC.
Oh, okay. So like Maryland kind of area.
Yeah, the DMV area.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. Who the hell? Just got a random ad on Facebook from someone I don't know. So.
Yeah.
That's never good. Anyways, yeah. So, what's the details here?
I don't really know. My friend's not being specific, and he's changing plans, so you know how that can be. So we were gonna go down to this area that, like, it's kind of like a hipster hangout area, and sometimes we like to sit there and like laugh at hipsters. So
I'm in a hipster city, so actually, I live in the hipster neighborhood of the hipster cities.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
I wanted to expound on what you were saying about trophies and things, though, because I was in a baseball team or softball. A softball team for a year when I was, I don't know, 11. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that, looking back, I realize now is, like, we were never told who won the games. Like, we just played the games. Like, to save our feelings, everybody got a trophy. Nobody was told who won. I didn't try enough to be invested in baseball and softball. But as soon as I got to martial arts, which was all about you either can do a push-up or you can't, but you better do that push-up. Like, that taught me how to be motivated towards something. That's why I love martial arts so much. You know, that's why I love, like, just, it's kind of like this feeling of, I know where I can be if I work hard. And that's the thing, is like, when you are just given trophies for doing just anything or just participating, you don't have a sense of where you could be if you worked hard, or even how hard it will be. So all these kids are going into college and realizing how hard life can be, and then flipping the fuck out.
Yeah.
Because they didn't have realistic goals. They didn't have an understanding of where they could be. And it's sad because you watch them kind of like lose their goals, because they either still feel entitled and flip the fuck out and try to change the institution, or they kind of just wallow in self-pity that they couldn't get where they thought they could go. It's because they didn't have they don't know how life be.
And that's exactly it. And what bothers me the most about this is that they're trying to, like, once again, going back to the whole, it's not about creating an intellectual space, it's about creating a home here. What's going to happen when you're done there, and then you do have to go out into the real world? You know, you're trying to make your university experience into this big safe space because your upbringing was a big safe space. You know, when you know you get, I'm sorry, but college students, you got to rip the Band-Aid off.
Yeah.
You know, just rip the Band-Aid off.
I grew up in a low income area. Mm-hmm. I grew up in a low income family. Like, we got along. I mean, there was food on the table most of the times. It's not like I was dying or anything, but I didn't have a lot of things, you know?
Yeah, it was the same.
There were some things. I look at my siblings, because there's a huge age gap between me and my oldest sibling. There's 3 of them, my sister, my brother, and my 2 brothers. There's a 9 years difference between me and my sister, and a lot of it has to do with, like, my parents, like, alcoholism issues and things like that. And they're never going to know what it's like to not have a house, to live in people's basements. They're never going to know what it's like to have parents that don't talk to each other. They're never going to know what it's like for your father to have a girlfriend. They're never going to know what it's like to not be able to get that video game until you are old enough to go and buy it yourself, because they have everything. Mm-hmm. And they're doing really well with it, because my parents teach them life. My parents they don't pussyfoot around things. They don't, like, cushion them or anything. But there's a lot of things that they're gonna have to cope with as adults, because they've never had to cope with it as a child. Sometimes I get so jealous of them, though, because I'm just like, they have all these things. They're going to have the college education paid for. They're going to have the example of me going through education and knowing the things that I regret about my education. I get an English degree, and I say it all the time, but I hate my English degree. I'm like, I really wish I would have done something English on the side and done something more practical.
Yeah.
And I would absolutely do that over again. But my brothers aren't going to have that issue. My sister, I don't know if she's going to go to college. She has her own goals and things like that. But my brothers are going to go to college, especially the oldest of my brothers is absolutely going to go to college, and he's going to have the opportunities that I didn't, because I was a first-gen college student, you know? And I just get so I just get so frustrated and upset at these people when they whine about things like that. When I'm just all like, how dare you? How dare you? I don't know. Sorry, this is me being angry about
by all means. I'm
these
right
things.
There with you here.
And that's why I get upset when people point at me and just all like, because of the way I look and the way I dress, they assume certain things about me, and I'm like, you are making an ass out of you.
Yeah.
Not me.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
anyway.
no. Trust me.
Sorry.
I used to for a short little while there before I got my current job, I was working customer service, right? Mm-hmm. Now I was a 6'3", at the time about 200 pounds, just looking like a meathead kind of thing, right? And people assumed I was a meathead. They thought I had the IQ of freaking Forrest Gump, working behind the counter of a freaking Shell station at the time, right? It was because at the time it was the only thing I could find after I got out of security. And I blew, and a lot of the time I blew their minds. They were like, holy crap, like, you know, they'd sit there and they'd try to pull faster, because a lot of scam artists in customer service, so many scam artists. And I learned to pick them up real quickly because I had experience with them from like my bouncing experience and, you know, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And I was just like straight up like, so there's one guy who tried to do a sunglasses scam, and I picked him up like within seconds. I was like, I know what you're doing. Come on now. Get out of here. Right. And it actually surprised a lot of people. Like some friends that I have now that I met while I was working there, they you know, even they tell me, they're like, oh, you know what, dude, you're actually pretty smart. Like I wouldn't have thought so when I first met you, because, you know, you were this guy, big, huge guy, shaved head, tattoos, you know, with a big long beard, and you know, and it was that kind of thing. I also wanted to point out, sorry, somebody in the chat said adversity breeds character, and I absolutely agree with that. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Like that.
The people that I respect the most have gone through, like, one of the people that I respect the most in this world is a pen pal friend that I have from Nicaragua. I did some missionary trips to Nicaragua when I was in high school, and so we've been in contact off and on, but for the last year and a half since I became an atheist, because he's like one of the only atheists in town, like, and he happened to be like translating for the Christian groups or whatever. Long story. But at any rate, I respect him so much because of the kind of character that he has, in spite of the situations that he's been in. Yeah. Extremely abused by both his parents. He went to school in a violent area where P was picked on because he was a little wimpy kid. Like, just, but he's just the toughest guy. Like, this, he's a pacifist. He's the sweetest guy, would never raise a hand against a woman, even though violence is a huge issue. Domestic violence against women is a huge issue in Nicaragua right now. Just the most amazing person that you would ever meet. And I cannot imagine him being any better if he had not gone through those things. Not that I wish he hadn't gone through those things, but just the kind of person that he is in spite of all those things. Now, it could have gone sour too. He could have ended up completely different had his personality not been that way. But those things that he's gone through make him just this wonderful person, you know?
Yeah.
Who's been through shit.
Now, there's a friend of mine, actually. He immigrated here from South Africa a few years back. Right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the guy is like he's got one of the most honest hearts of anybody I've ever met. Like, you know, he's such an honest person. He's such a like upfront in your, you know, like but a person who stands up for himself too, right? Mm-hmm. And he was my drinking buddy for a while back when I was a bouncer. And the stories he would tell me of growing up in South Africa, I was just like, my jaw dropped. Like some of the stuff that he was telling me, he was telling me about, like, you know, murder was just something that like was common. Mm-hmm. Like he sat there and he's just like, I know 3 people who were murdered and I know 3 other guys who did the murdering, you know? And it was just so common there that you just kind of like accepted it. Like, okay, well, he had good reason to kill that guy, so I'm just going to look the other way, right? Yeah. Things like that, and like the struggles that he went through just growing up, and especially in terms of the whole like the you know, the black community versus the white community out there, right?
Apartheid thing.
Yeah, well, it went further than that. His little sister got kidnapped and raped, right?
Wow.
And his father found the guy that was responsible for it and basically threw him to the crocodiles, right? But this thing was commonplace out there. Like,
well, he deserved it.
Yeah, well, that was just it. That's what I was saying. Like, you know, murder was commonplace, right? And you know, it was just like the way he's explaining this to me. Like, this is like a drunken confession that he gave to me, and I was like, I don't know why you're telling me this, because this is Canada here. You know, this is a little bit different. You know, when that kind of stuff happens here, you don't tell people. You tell the police. You tell this. But you don't tell your friends, right? Mm-hmm. And but you know, he's telling me this. But you know what? The guy was so like kind-hearted and just like on the level. He ended up marrying like. I like to call her the Playboy model, and she very much is. Like she very much
gorgeous,
is.
basically.
She's absolutely gorgeous, right?
Like, you look at her and you're just all like, you have to take a second for your brain to
kind of process,
do its thing.
You're like,
just all like, is this a masterpiece?
People like this are real. They're like,
it happens.
You're not airbrushed. What's going on? You know?
Yeah.
But she's also like one of the most kind-hearted people that I'd ever met, right? And it was amazing to me, like how much this guy had earned in his life through how much he'd been through, and like to this day, I have so much respect for that guy. You know, not just because of what he's been through, but how he chose to handle it.
You have to, you know. And the problem with social justice warriors, to bring it back to the topic. Mm-hmm. Is that they take a look at those people and they say, well, he suffered so much and so much more than you. So there's have to be this kind of deference as opposed to kind of like, and it's so fucked up, because you can't, if you have to defer to him because he's been through more than you, then you can't have a mutual respect for each other.
No.
You can't be friends. You can't have that, like, dude, like, I don't know what you've gone through, but like we're cool. Like, I respect you for that. Like, that kind of thing. You can't have respect for somebody that you pity. Yeah.
And that's actually very, that is very true. That is very true. And I've been through that enough times in my life to know. But I think that's what social justice warriors, and I use that in the derogatory, you know what I mean? To me, that's a derogatory term.
Can I say something though?
Yeah, go ahead.
Like, I think a huge part of of that, like, because I'm really big on respect, right?
Yeah.
I find respecting other people's boundaries, respecting other people's life stories and who they are as people as one of the most like epitomes of what it means to care about someone.
Hmm.
You know? I want to respect those people. So I kind of feel like respect is not something that social justice warriors like to talk about. And I think that's a very almost female thing. Like, I think that a lot of ways that like men function has to do with respect, respecting people's places, right?
Hmm.
And I kind of feel like a lot of these social, and this is just kind of like up in the air, a thought that popped in my head. A lot of people like who come from these social justice warrior things are so focused on equality that they don't focus at all on respect.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
From
respect is
my
such a wonderful thing,
oh,
you know?
well, respect. Like in some ways, it establishes a pecking order, for lack of a better term. Um,
It's not even just a pecking order. It's
yeah.
like best relationships I've had with men are relationships in which I respect them as a person.
Hmm.
So I respect the time that they need to play video games and I don't harass them about it. And because I respect them as a person, I don't feel threatened by the fact that they at this moment would rather play video games than talk to me. Which a lot of people, they'll say to me like, "Are you sure? Are you sure?" I'm like, "I'm sure." Absolutely, but they've had experiences where women have not respected their boundaries, where they've needed those spaces of time where they needed that boundary respected. And I kind
Yeah.
of feel like that's one thing that men need to know how to be gentle and kind towards women. And this is an exaggeration, obviously, but I
Yeah.
think that in a way, women really need to learn how to respect men because respect is not the same with women as it is with men.
Well,
Like the way that we understand respect, I think.
we're in an increasingly androgenized culture these days,
Yeah.
right? It is getting increasingly androgenized, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just there's a lot of work that comes with that still hasn't been done yet.
Yeah.
You know, because when I like going harkening back to my whole experience with the bikers, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Respect was a big thing there. Like, respect was, you gave the proper respect, you got the proper respect.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you disrespect somebody out of turn, well, then you're going to be shown how much respect that person's actually due. You know, and you know, and it could get violent at times and that kind of thing. But when you actually like you know, parse that with you know, the traditional, you know, female gender role version of respect, you know,
Mm-hmm.
it's more just an accepted thing. Like, you just did it. You know, there was no necessarily, and I might be, you know, and I might be way off because it's out of my, it's out of my realm of experience, right? Because I've never experienced life as a woman, therefore I can't really speak to it, right? But from the outside looking in, it just seemed like there was a lot more demanding of respect rather than earning of respect in a lot of the female circles. You know, like they would demand it and they would require it, but like they wouldn't necessarily do anything that was worthy of it.
Yeah, that's what I was saying, is that their idea of what respect is completely different.
Yeah.
Respect for women has to do with respecting our feelings, like basically respecting our feelings.
Yeah.
Like, not, I mean, this is obviously an overgeneralization.
Obviously, yeah.
Like, obviously way overgeneralized. But in a lot of, like, when you're in a group of women, respecting another group of women is not telling her she looks fat today. You know, like, not is complying with the way that she feels today and, and what her needs are, like helping her with her needs, helping each other with our needs. It's a very egalitarian thing that I think has its place, but at the same time, I very much appreciate and love the idea that you gain respect by doing something.
Mm-hmm.
Like
meritocracy.
That there's two different kinds of respect. I think the difference, and it's the whole like women need love, men need respect. Like, I don't think that's necessarily true. I just think that when women interact with men, I see a lot of the times when it doesn't work out very well, a lot of it has to do with not understanding the way that men function and vice versa when it comes to their needs. And one of the needs of men is to get a certain amount of respect of their boundaries and who they are as people based on what they have done. And I think that that's been a huge, like, that would change a lot, you know? Because how is a man who's not allowed to hit a woman or isn't very good at coming back, if she's completely trampling over his boundaries and acting as a woman like a normal woman would do, and vice versa, how is a woman going to defend herself if all she wants is love and he's just all like, respect me? How is that going to work out, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. It's very interesting.
I like being respected in the way that I see a lot of men being respected. I like people to look up to me because I've said something right. And I want people to just trash me when I am wrong. I want people to because then I can defend myself.
For sure.
I want everything out in the open. But, you know, even so, I still understand and feel like I'm definitely a woman, so I still understand the other side too. Does that make sense?
No. Well, I think we can definitely empathize with the male/female forms. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, we may never actually fully like understand the experience, but we can definitely empathize. We can definitely look into that, right?
Yeah.
I back when I was, prior to the whole abuse experience, I probably would have had no problem going full male feminist, like Steve Shives level, you know what I mean? But having actually seen well, you know what? He's not a bad guy. Don't get me wrong.
I know him in real life. That's how we got to talk. Like, we know each other in real life. We live around the same area.
Oh, wow. Okay. So that's interesting.
Like, within an hour from each other.
Okay.
So.
All right. Yeah. Sorry, I rag on him a lot. It's because while I agree with him on a lot of things, it's just his unwillingness to not even so much accept, but to just understand that there's another side to the story that he's painting as misogynist. That's definitely not, like, in my experience, is not at all. Right. Yeah. And he's got me blocked on Twitter. I've never talked to him. I have not.
He uses a block bot.
I know, and I'm on that block bot, unfortunately. But
I don't know how I got on that block bot.
You follow people who are the central harassers or something like that. So Richard Dawkins. If you follow Richard Dawkins,
it was funny. I had just created my Twitter account like 2 weeks prior to our talk, and then the day before we were supposed to have our talk, I friended him. And then I tweeted about our talk, and then I go back to his page, and he had blocked me, and I was just all like, "What the fuck? Oh my god, what the fuck?" Yeah. But then he explained, like, he didn't explain what a block bot was, but he was just like, "Oh, I use a block bot." So then I figured it out.
Yeah, block bot is essentially guilt by association.
Yeah.
So if you follow, like, for instance, I follow Christina Hoff Summers, and I follow who else do I follow? Like, I follow Sargon, things like that. So I'm on the Gamergate block bot, right? And because I follow like Richard Dawkins and I follow a few other like Sam Harris and stuff like that, I'm also on the Atheism Plus block bot, right? So my guess is that Steve is on the Atheism Plus block bot. And there's actually a little website that you can go to and you can type in your username and that kind of thing. But anyways, that's getting besides.
There's plenty of people who disagree with Dawkins who subscribe to follow him.
Yeah,
Blockbot,
for sure.
That's ridiculous. Blockbots are ridiculous.
No, they are. No, I fully agree. Like, you can agree with, you can disagree with a lot of what person says and still follow them, right?
Yeah.
And not.
So that's kind of punishing other people for following someone that they might not even disagree with.
Exactly. Right, and that's
what the fuck.
And that's the issue with block bots. That's the issue I have with block bots, and that's if there's anything I can say to Steve, it's like, buddy, drop the block bot. Like, I understand that it saves you the harassment from certain people that absolutely do hate you, and I agree. There are people out there who hate you, right? But the vast majority of the people that you're blocking don't. They want to talk to you.
Canadian Bacon, he was blocked. I mean, Canadian Bacon is the persona of what like that nice Canadian boy looks like sounds like. Everything he said was just all like, "Oh, I'm sorry." Like, I love the guy. Right. Like, "Oh, it's okay. Like, this is what I think." And I was just all like, "You're so adorable. I just want to hug you."
It's like that old joke. What does a Canadian say when you step on his foot?
Sorry.
Sorry.
But yeah, so
We're well known for being too polite.
Yeah. So, yeah. But yeah, so I lost my train of thought. Oh, but he was blocked by Steve.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine what this guy could have said on YouTube. And so I can't imagine what this guy could have said. It just blows my mind.
Yeah. Well, I, for one, would love to see a Steve Shives Sargon conversation, because that would be like...
He's never going to do it.
He's never going to do it. We've already seen exactly what he thinks of that idea. Like it's, what was really the most interesting part of that stream with you guys is watching his facial expressions.
Yeah. I kept throwing in like jokes. Like I almost did the whole like, oh, you like my sliding glass door? But I know his wife was there in the background going...
Yeah.
So.
Yes. I know.
I didn't want to put him out there too much, because then we couldn't do anything in real life. Like we collaborate. He helps out with a local public access show that we do, basically.
Okay, all right.
Road to Reason. Fair. It's a skeptic thing, but
okay.
I don't do it a whole lot anymore. So
yeah. No, well, I've always been body language is something that I've always been really fascinated with, right? So that's why I like a lot of the face.
What does my body language tell you
right now that you're totally trying to just be crazy?
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, continue. Steve's body language.
Well, his facial kinesiology essentially was really interesting, because you can tell that he was getting dumbfounded at certain points and just like unable to unable to connect thoughts together while you were explaining it. Like, for instance, when you talked about being anti-feminist, or not being anti-feminist, but having some views that could be considered anti-feminist, right? He was very like, that's different, because we know each other, so
I'm like well, kind of what's the difference between you knowing me and having a conversation with me and like you think my ideas are bad, right? Like that was my point, was like my ideas are very similar to Sargon's ideas. We approach things differently, and I don't have a huge YouTube channel that I can make money off of, like, having fun.
Yeah.
Like, so, but I can't understand how he thinks Sargon is a professional troll. It just blows my mind.
That actually
just like, what? I don't think he expected what he got out of me. Because we did one show together where we interviewed him, and we had a short discussion in the middle of the show. It was the first time I actually spoke to him in person, where I called him out on some of his attitudes, right? Mm-hmm. And we had a conversation, but the way I did it was very much like fun, and I wasn't interrogating him and things like that. And I think he was expecting more of that. I think he was possibly expecting more of that, and not really knowing that I knew a little bit more than that.
Yeah. So. See, now I've heard conversations that Sargon has had with his like detractors and whatnot. Like he did a stream with like Laughing Witch and what's her name, Jenny McDermott, right? And he was absolutely polite the entire time. He was letting them speak. He was coming in with his counterpoints. In fact, I think he could have been a little bit more, assertive. Right, he was very passive in a lot of it. Right,
I think he did that because he wants more people to come on that disagree with him.
Exactly, right. And I think that a conversation with Steve Shives, because Steve's like, he's not a dumb guy. Like I can see that in him. He's not a dumb guy at all, right? And I think that a lot of headway, I guess is the best way to put it, could be made with like an honest conversation between these two camps. Right, because what I'm noticing is that there's so much that like the anti SJW crowd actually does agree with in terms of like racism and things. Like racism is bad. Obviously, racism is bad. A lot of people agree with this. Sexism is bad. It's just the methods that they disagree on. But that makes them out to be like, for instance, Gamergate's being out there being called like a terrorist group and like worse than ISIS and things like that. And a lot of it is hyperbole, but like it's still hitting the newspapers, and then there's people who have no idea what this is reading this. Oh, okay, Gamergate's a terrorist group. and going with that assumption, right? I had a coworker come up because some of my coworkers know about my involvement in a lot of this kind of stuff, right? And they talk to me about it, and they understand what the whole thing's about, right? But I had another coworker come up with me like, "Hey, what's this I hear about you being part of Gamergate? Like, why are you part of this? Blah, 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 it's a terrorist group." And I actually had to take the time and be like, no. This is what caused Gamergate. This is what Gamergate. And I had to explain, like, Gamergate itself is a hashtag. That's the best way to describe it. It's a hashtag that people use to communicate, right?
These ideas,
and
anybody can do it. Like, for all we know, every single bad idea that was out there came from people, from feminists who were like hashtagging it up.
Or third-party trolls and whatnot, right? And so that's what. Anyway, going back to the whole Sargon being a professional troll or whatever. I mean, that's just. I don't think the guy's ever experienced a real troll if that's what he thinks. Either that, or he hasn't even, or he hasn't bothered to take the time to actually see what Sargon says. And that's a possibility. But anyways,
I don't think that at this point it's about Sargon. I think at this point it's about how adamant he's been against it.
Yeah.
I think at this point, no matter what happens, he's going to stick with his guns on his decision not to speak to Sargon because of his previous. Changing his mind now would be wimpy.
Yeah.
It would be perceived as him with his tail between his legs. But if he holds out, then at least he's sticking with his guns. Right? And I think I kind of respect him a little bit for that. There's a little bit of that in there because, after I make a decision, I wouldn't want somebody coming at me like, how come you did this? How come you did this? How come you did this? Like at a certain point, I expect people to just drop it,
Well, yeah, I also understand that the guy's got a particularly rabid following, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah.
Harkening back to the whole Oxford Dictionary being asked to remove the word rabid feminist from the dictionary.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
wonderful.
I thought that was priceless. Anyways, but like so I understand that like a lot of his following, like he's and like from running a YouTube channel for as long as I have now, I do have some regulars, and you get to know what their lines of thinking are. You get to know what all that kind of stuff, right? So I even find myself from time to time being like, wait, is this like, even though this is my opinion, is this something that my followers are going to have a problem with, right? And I had to stop and think about that and be like, wait, why does it matter? It's my opinion, right?
Yeah, it's really easy to get caught up in, and that's one thing I keep saying is that it's really easy to get caught up in the yes men in your group.
Yeah.
And like the people, because people kept saying nice things to me on my YouTube channel. They're still saying nice things to me on my YouTube channel. And that's really great. It boosts my confidence and makes me think more highly of myself as a YouTuber. But I always have this thing in the back of my mind where I'm just like, how much of this is warranted? Really?
Yeah.
Like, how much of the compliments are really well thought out and warranted?
A lot of times, I think that people, like YouTube comments, and this is what I really like. People are like, "Oh, the YouTube comments are fucking horrible. They're this."
Not really, not mine, but yeah.
All they are is people's surface thoughts.
Yeah.
All right. It's the same thing with Twitter. It's you've got surface thoughts coming at surface thoughts coming at surface thoughts, and it's just. Like sometimes it gets a little bit deeper, and sometimes they're just snap reactions, right? And in the end, all they really are is they're just comments. They're just comments. Sometimes somebody makes a good point, and you engage with them a little. Sometimes somebody's a little rude, and you engage with them a little, right? But for the most part, it's nowhere comparable to like academic discourse. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right, like it tries to take that sometimes, and you will get some people who are really good at the art of debate and all that kind of stuff who you can engage with for a while, and you can actually learn something from.
Yeah.
Right?
That's why I love the comment section. I really do.
Oh, for sure. And that's absolutely. I'm very pro free speech, and so comment sections go right in with that. like I also run a blog, and the whole platform of the blog is built on free speech. Like I've published articles from people that I absolutely disagree with.
Yeah.
Because that's the point of the blog. We're supposed to have these discussions. We're supposed to be able to have this, like, or like Thunderfoot says. I really like Thunderfoot's point of view on the whole good ideas float to the top.
Not always.
Not always, but like I do like that philosophy. You know what I mean? Does that make any sense? Whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you like really like gross, like if you were a really, really gross diet, like your poop like floats to the top. So I'm thinking like that's what popped in my head. I'm just all like, not everything that's good floats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's that wasn't quite what I was getting at when I said float to the top.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
That's what happened in my head.
Ideas are shit. I get you. No,
my
it's
head,
all right. It's all good.
Yeah, my head is like poop jokes and dick jokes are like.
Yeah, well, this is the first time we've actually mentioned dick jokes, even though I said bad dick jokes on the.
Yeah. Well, the thing is about dick jokes is that they're only funny if you have like that good moment. Like I kind of like was testing you a little bit where I put that out there, and I was just like,
oh, I know.
He better. I wonder if he's gonna get there. Go there.
No,
but you didn't do it, and I was just all like, you made a stupid hat joke instead. I'm like, what kind of hats, huh? But anyway.
I know, and you kept pushing it, and I saw what you were doing. I knew exactly what you were doing. I wasn't taking the bait though, because that's not what you do in polite conversation. Not right off the bat, anyways. You gotta get to know each other a little bit.
I don't like polite conversation. Aww. I'm just kidding. I do.
Okay, all right. All right, but yeah, no. So we're getting pretty close to 12:30 here.
My friend canceled, so.
Oh, you're
but I'm probably. I should probably get going anyway. There's things I need to get done now that my friend's canceled.
There's also things that I need to do and whatnot. So anyway, so for the so we actually ended up getting a couple of viewers, anyways. Mm-hmm. It's not usually the prime time for live streams.
Mm-hmm. But, sorry about that.
So guys, this is for those who don't know, this is Kay Zak. I suggest you guys go check out her channel. I'm actually going to put a link to her channel in the description. Hold on, channel. If I can type, right? So save. Yeah. Okay, there. Now it's in the description, and I think this is a really good chat.
Yeah, I thought that was really good. It was a little bit meandering, but like it just depends on what you like as a chat.
Yeah.
My chats, I always want to get to a specific point.
Yeah.
Like just because of like who I am as a person, but this was fun. This is fun.
I am a little bit of a pothead, so
So you meander a lot.
I like meandering conversations because I find I get more out of them. Like they're unexpected and they're like, oh, and you always get into some juicy conversation bits, right? So so that was that. But anyways, I had a good time, and I think maybe we should do this again sometime in the future.
Yeah, YouTube friends. I'm making friends on YouTube.
Friends, right on. Yeah, well, we can. That's what it's all about. We help each other out. We, make you an offer. But yeah, so guys, go sub to Kay Zak, and So, do you want to say anything before we stop broadcast?
Not in particular.
Awesome. Not in particular.
It was great having you guys around. All your 6 people.
All the 6 people. Oh, there'll be more people that watch this later, though, because that's usually how this works. All right. Peace out, guys. I'll see you later.